Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Sentinel of American Comics. Chapter 51. In the old apartment building in Hell's Kitchen, Matt, who had changed into a red demon suit, was lying on the sofa, with circles of white bandages wrapped around his chest and arms, and his face was pale and weak. The blind lawyer's home was very lively at this time. The Punisher was leaning on the cupboard, carrying a bottle of beer and drinking heavily, while Jessica and Luke Cage were sitting on chairs, frowning, as if thinking about the ultimate problem. "You should be lying in the hospital." Jessica looked at the seriously injured Daredevil and couldn't help but said, "Your sternum is broken and there are contusions on your arms and shoulders. If you don't receive treatment, I'm afraid it will be difficult to recover in a short time." Matt, who revealed his true identity, shook his head and said feebly, "Now is not the time to talk about this. Danny Rand was taken away by the Hand. Although we don't know why they did this, but from Frank's investigation, it seems that the Hand is definitely not simply inviting Danny Rand to be a guest. No matter what their purpose is, we must rescue Danny." The Punisher nodded in agreement. The Hand is brewing a huge conspiracy, and Danny Rand is undoubtedly a key figure. He must not allow the other party to be under the control of the Hand. We are no match for that guy. Jessica poured cold water on him at the right time. The man wearing the mask single-handedly killed 5 people, including himself. Almost all the street heroes in Hell's Kitchen were defeated by the opponent. Such a powerful opponent made Jessica unable to even think about fighting. That guy shouldn't be from the Hand. Maybe they are just a cooperative relationship. In any case, we have to take action. The Punisher's rich voice echoed in the apartment, and his eyes swept across Jessica and Luke. Cage seemed to be waiting for the answer. The burly black man shrugged and said, "I've always been on your side." Seeing Luke Cage agree to join the team, Matt, who was lying on the sofa, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. This black man who was invulnerable and had amazing defensive power was really a rare combat power. With his help, the difficulty of dealing with the Hand has also been reduced. Seeing everyone's eyes focused on her, Jessica stood up irritably. After walking back and forth a few times, she complained angrily, "I just want to live a peaceful life, but why does trouble always come to my door?" The brunette with a cold temperament sighed helplessly. "It's such a bad decision to fight with one group of lunatics against another group of lunatics." Jessica, who actually refused deep down, finally agreed to join the team. She didn't know why she made such a decision. A blind man, a wanted criminal, a black man, and herself. There were only 4 people, but prepared to fight against a powerful evil organization. This is not a heroic story in comics. In the end, justice defeats evil, good people are always rescued, and bad people are punished. The real world is often cold and cruel, and is far less beautiful than the story. After experiencing a heavy blow, Jessica deeply understood that becoming a hero often requires paying a huge price, so she repeatedly refused to join the team of Punishers. "But why did you agree again?" Jessica looked at Daredevil, who was covered in bandages, Luke Cage with firm eyes, and the Punisher who was wiping his weapon. Something in her heart was slightly touched, perhaps because the blood in her body had not yet cooled down. Or maybe he was infected by these lunatics. The brunette shook off the messy thoughts in her mind and turned to look out the window. Lead-gray clouds gathered in the sky, as if a heavy rain would fall soon. Hell's Kitchen, Port Warehouse. In the spacious warehouse filled with goods, the 4 leaders of the Hand gathered together, the stumbling Mrs. Gao, the Japanese Murakami, the African warlord Sawanda, and the grim-faced fighter. They sat on a table and looked at each other. They looked at each other with different emotions in their eyes. "Alexandra is dead, Black Sky is out of control, and our current situation is very unfavorable." Murakami spoke first. The Japanese looked at the fighter with a sinister expression. The opponent controlled the armed forces of the Hand Association. Apart from the ninjas in his own hands, he was the strongest fighter. "We will have to pay a heavy price for killing Haikong, and without her, who will deal with the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen? Besides, Danny Rand is still in the opponent's hands." Bo Tu shook his head. "At this time, only fools will take the lead. No one knows the strength of Haikong better than them. It is a natural killing machine. Unless they are prepared to do anything at all costs, no one dares to take action rashly. Haikong is not alone. There is a guy beside her whose origins are unclear. Mrs. Gao, the eldest, reminded her that her sharp intuition over the years told her that that man was even scarier than Haikong. The 5 fingers of the hand are actually 5 different factions, and they do not cooperate seamlessly with each other. They also have intrigues and conspiracies, but these petty quarrels are not usually brought to the table, but now in this situation, the 4 people ignored their previous conflicts of interest. The black sky made them feel a huge threat. Alexandra's death made the leaders who had lived for centuries fearful. That's why they gathered together in private to discuss how to deal with black sky and regain control of the hand. Let's bear with it for now. We'll wait until we get the dragon bone. Suawanda's dark face was filled with chills. No matter how powerful Haikong is, she is only flesh and blood after all. If you want to kill her, there are countless ways to do it. Arrive. Yes, the keel is the most important thing. Nothing is more important than extending life. Use the black sky to deal with the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, and finally catch them all. A faint look appeared on Mrs. Gao's wrinkled old face. Smile. This old woman who looks like she is in her final years actually controls 80% of the drug business in New York. Even the underworld emperor Kingpin once had to be polite to her. If anyone thought that she was old, they would have contempt for her heart, then the end will probably be extremely miserable. Now is a critical moment. I hope everyone can put aside their previous selfishness, stop worrying about petty profits, and cooperate sincerely. Murakami said in a weird Japanese pronunciation. The other 3 nodded. When people are threatened or panicked, they will always hug each other for warmth. This is a biological characteristic derived from the subconscious. In the spacious and secluded port warehouse, the 4 leaders of the hand reached an agreement that the inside must be settled first and the outside must be settled first. Black Sky could first deal with the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, and finally free up the hidden dangers. The 4 leaders who secretly joined forces left the quiet port one after another. A black car parked on the dock slowly started. Wesley, who was sitting inside, took off his glasses and wiped the lenses. After a while, he dialed the phone and said softly, "Boss, both parties are here." Lead-gray clouds piled up in the sky, and the bright electric light was like a silver snake, tearing apart the thick cumulonimbus clouds. Torrential rainstorms came unexpectedly, and heavy raindrops poured down from high in the sky, knocking on the glass windows and making a slight sound. The world outside the window is shrouded in a hazy rain curtain, water mist rises between the sky and the earth, the winding and congested traffic on the highway, the huge and bright billboard lights, the brilliant light blooming is looming, like a strange and bizarre world. Strange world. Shaun stood quietly in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the densely populated skyscrapers in the city, and said softly, "The street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, and the other 4 fingers of the hand, they all started to take action." Erica stood in front of the weapon shelf, pulled out 2 strange weapons called iron rulers, and played with them enthusiastically. "Aren't these all what you expected? Suawanda, Murakami, Mrs. Gao, Bo Disciple, none of these people are economical." Even when Alexandra was alive, they all had their own thoughts and refused to obey anyone, let alone me taking the position of leader. Shaun smiled, took off the black mask on his face, revealing his unusually young face, and took a deep breath. He had instructed Wesley to secretly monitor the whereabouts of the other leaders of the hand, and the 4 fingers also had something to do with it. Action, and the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen begin to team up. Sooner or later there will be a fierce collision between the 2 sides. As long as they plan well, he and Erica will not become profiteers. The hand's goal is to bury the dragon's remains underground, while the street heroes want to save Danny Rand and destroy the hand's conspiracy. The conflict between the 2 parties is irreconcilable. You have made up your mind. The young man seemed to have thought of something, and a hint of joking appeared in his eyes. "Are you sure you can face Matt Murdock, your former lover, with your current appearance?" Hearing Shaun's question, Erica's dark eyes fluctuated, like a stone thrown into a calm lake, causing tiny ripples. If there is anyone else in the world who can be Erica's bond, Matt Murdock, the blind lawyer with a sense of justice and the Red Devil of Hell's Kitchen, probably ranks at the top. She and Matt met in college, and soon fell in love. Behind the beautiful and pure love story, there was actually a cruel truth hidden, all of which came from the stickman's order to get close to Matt Murdock, then pulled him to his side and built him into an outstanding warrior to fight against the powerful hand. When Erica realized that she had devoted her true feelings, she decisively chose to leave. A few years later, she reunited with her old lover in Hell's Kitchen, but their positions had changed, and Matt put on the Red Devil suit, transforming into Daredevil, fighting crime and upholding justice, while Erica's hands are covered in blood, and the tenderness of the past has long been destroyed by the cruel reality. Putting aside the complicated emotions in her heart, Erica took a deep breath and said softly, "You said that I have been given a free life and have the right to choose my own life. This is the choice I made. Nothing can go back to the past. It's better to forget it and let it remain the best it once was." She stared into Shaun's eyes and whispered, "Well, are you sure you have this determination?" Shaun walked up to Erica. His 6-foot height allowed him to look down at the beautiful girl in red clothes and black hair. The man's gaze was very aggressive, like a ferocious beast that suddenly showed its fangs. A dangerous aura suddenly emitted from his tall and straight body. Erica took half a step back, and then looked directly at each other, not to be outdone. The two were very close, already beyond the safe distance between opposite genders. The stubborn girl could almost feel Shaun's slightly warm breath. A faint blush appeared on her frosty and indifferent face. The atmosphere seems to be gradually heating up, with a tendency to slip towards the edge of ambiguity. "Are you really determined enough in your heart?" Shaun looked at Erica deeply, questioning in his tone. "Choose to become the leader of the Hand, integrate with the power of the Black Sky, say goodbye to the past completely, and get rid of the past. The bondage of the Stickman to you, the bondage of Matt Murdock to you, cut off all of these, embrace a new life. Have you really thought about it?" The man's voice was like thunder on the ground, suddenly shaking Erica out of her confusion. She subconsciously looked up, and a pair of deep eyes stared at her, with an inexplicable and strange power that was breathtaking. "The dust-laden memories in my heart flashed quickly like a fleeting glance, and the fleeting clips kept switching like a movie. Stickman, adoptive parents, Matt Murdock. Those who hold an important position in one's life clearly appear before his eyes, and the beautiful memories and emotions break through the confinement and turn into an endless turbulent wave, impacting the established spiritual defense line." The animalistic light flashed fiercely, and the power originating from the Black Sky roared ferociously in his mind. Like a beast trapped in a cage, it had surrendered to Erica's will. The desire to kill and the desire for blood merged like instinct. To this body, it will never allow Erica, as the container, to regain those weak and useless emotions. Two completely different emotional consciousnesses collided with each other in the mind, like two armies at war. No one was willing to give in, fiercely occupying every inch of space. A look of pain appeared in Erica's eyes. She couldn't help but turn to Shaun for help. Her beautiful eyes flashed with pleading. She grabbed the other person's shoulders tightly with both hands, trying to get strength from this powerful man to fight against the two kinds of diseases in her body. A fierce confrontation of emotions. "You're not ready yet, I can help you." The corner of Shaun's mouth curled up slightly. The Black Sky in Erica's body has always been a hidden danger. It can bring powerful power to people, but if you are not careful, you will become a slave to the beast. It's like a double-edged sword that can both kill the enemy and hurt yourself. Shaun wants to solve this problem, at least so that he doesn't have to worry about when Erica suddenly loses control and turns into a senseless killing machine. The human will is always strong and fragile at times, so the Black Sky that may bring danger in the future must be eradicated once and for all. The man's palm gently touched Erica's cheek. The warm palm made the struggling girl calm down a little. Her chin was gently lifted, and she had to raise her head to bear the aggression of those deep eyes. "Look. Take a deep breath, stay calm, don't be afraid, forget the fear in your heart, that beast can't hurt you, control it." Shaun's eyes flashed with brilliance, and the solar radiation absorbed in his body slowly condensed like tiny bits of light. His mind controlled this gentle power, flowing up along his limbs and bones, like a gurgling water, seeping into eye bit by bit. Enrica's body. After a series of battles, Shaun vaguely touched the essence of power. The powerful energy derived from solar radiation. In addition to strengthening his own physique and improving various values such as strength, speed, recovery ability, etc., he should also have other abilities. The wonderful use. Later, he got inspiration from Danny Rand's manipulation of the chi in the body, and tried to control the energy in the body with his thoughts. Just like Kunlun's Iron Fist, he released the energy and mixed it with the power of his own mind to form a special ability. The energy formed by the star's light flowed through Erica's body like a trickle. The originally restless emotions suddenly calmed down. The negative personality condensed in the black sky suddenly trembled and dissipated under the impact of the shining golden light. A golden figure filled Erica's heart, and in the blurry shadow, a firm will shined brightly like the sun. You are now qualified to make a choice. Hell's Kitchen is located in the most prosperous area of Manhattan in New York. This chaotic place, known as the hotbed of evil, is like a shadow in the sun. The common laws of civilized society do not work here as imagined. Those wandering on the streets, gangsters and gangsters who prefer to solve problems with fists and force. As night falls quietly, this area where gangs are spread takes on a different kind of vitality every night. Those scantily clad street girls, gang members selling drug pills everywhere, and fierce tattooed men, they look like. They are burrowing animals that crawl out of the ground and live in simple and dilapidated slums. Of course, this is just the living conditions of those at the bottom. They are humble and inconspicuous in Hell's Kitchen. They are like tireless worker ants, working hard for the gang leaders who control the territory of the neighborhood and earning a meager salary. In this chaotic and sinful place, life is difficult and numb. Hellfire Club. Wesley sat in the box on the second floor with a gentle smile on his gentle face. Since Kingpin's death, he had accepted all the underworld emperor's inheritance, and under Shaun's instructions, he had transferred most of his illegal business to, and the territory were all given to the Hand and the Irish, and he used the large sums of funds raised to complete the laundering and transfer of the property under his name. James Wesley, this personal assistant who originally hid behind the scenes and worked hard to manage the company's business for Kingpin, suddenly became a famous real estate upstart in New York. There is no need to grovel or smile every day. Wesley, who has huge wealth and amazing industry, now only needs to remain loyal to the young boss. Mr. James, those drug traffickers in Mexico don't agree with the distribution share you proposed. After King's absence, the Coven brothers became more and more arrogant. They even said that sooner or later it would be their turn to make the decision in Hell's Kitchen. An intelligence broker said cautiously, many people in Hell's Kitchen were talking about the gentleman in front of them, and the thrilling stories of how he killed Kingpin and Bullseye, replaced the once fierce underworld emperor, and successfully ascended the throne were circulated in the bar. The ups and downs, twists and turns of the plot are so exciting that it almost makes people believe it. When Wesley hears these rumors occasionally, he will feel dumbfounded. The truth is that he was favored by the young boss without doing anything at all. This location. Brothers Coven, they are not satisfied with the allocation share I proposed. Well, tell Vladimir and Anatoly, don't the Russians really want to gain a foothold in Hell's Kitchen? Get rid of the Coven brothers and the port's transportation, I'll leave the trade to them. Wesley opened a bottle of red wine and poured a glass for the intelligence broker. He adjusted his glasses and smiled gently. There is a lot of business in Hell's Kitchen, including the Hand, the Irish, and the Mexicans. These people occupy the best places. However, they are far from contented with their territory, and grab food like mad dogs, not even leaving the leftovers for others. That's not how business works. The cake must be shared by everyone to make it bigger and bigger. Are you right? The intelligence broker nodded subconsciously. He was just a small person making a living in Hell's Kitchen, selling some gang information, or selling other intelligence to earn commissions. In the underground world of New York, there are countless people like him, who work exclusively for those who are above and beyond. Big shot running errands. I gave up Jin Bin's illegal business and sold the smuggling trade and heroin factory. Therefore, many people feel that I am no longer worthy of fear after losing many thugs. Without those territories, my dignity can be ignored by others. Trample, but they don't know that I own 80% of the land in Hell's Kitchen, the ships they smuggled, and the factory warehouses are all mine. Wesley sipped the scarlet liquid, breathed a sigh of relief, and continued, my boss said that there is no future in being a gangster. You have to be the person who divides the cake and sets the rules of the game. I don't want to touch illegal business. Then it's because I'm afraid of getting my hands dirty. As a law-abiding citizen of New York, how could I possibly engage in drug smuggling? This gentleman was leaning on the sofa. Under his seemingly gentle appearance, there was a heart-stopping sharpness. He stared at the frightened intelligence broker and said in a calm voice, send me a message. Starting today, if you want to win doing business in Hell's Kitchen, you must follow my rules, otherwise I guarantee that not a single box of his smuggled goods will be able to be shipped out of the port, and the drugs in the warehouse will be piled up until they become moldy and cannot be sold. Quote. You will become a public enemy, Mr. James. The intelligence broker's voice trembled. The gentleman opposite him was too crazy. All the gangs in Hell's Kitchen will be your enemies. No, after tonight, there will only be one voice in Hell's Kitchen. A smile appeared on Wesley's face, and the young boss had cleared all obstacles for him. The intelligence broker left with mixed emotions. He could almost imagine how much turmoil Hell's Kitchen would usher in after he spread the news. This gentleman who usurped all of Kingpin's property undoubtedly wanted to steal money from all the gangsters. How could those extremely vicious thugs tolerate someone putting their hands into their pockets? Even Kingpin had never done anything like this. Wesley quietly drank the red wine in his glass. He remembered the promise made to him by his young boss, the new ruler of Hell's Kitchen, the new emperor of the New York underworld. Even though he was in the city, he couldn't help but feel excited. Wesley took out the phone and dialed the boss's number. Everything is ready. Daredevil's group has been dispatched. They plan to rescue Danny. After Rand, blow up the whole building. Wow, what an exciting idea. Those people in Murakami probably know it too. The two gangs will collide soon, and the fun is about to begin. There was a slight sound of rapid breathing on the other end of the phone, and a woman's moans seemed to be vaguely heard. This made Wesley feel a little embarrassed. His boss was really energetic. Well, don't get me wrong, I'm just exercising. Well, take this opportunity to clean up those gangsters in one fell swoop, and get rid of all the disobedient ones. All the power in Erica's hands will be given to you to command. Tonight, Hell's Kitchen is your home turf. If you don't bother me, boss, please continue to exercise. Silently cleaning up the gratitude that surged from his heart, Wesley hung up the phone. The other side of Hell's Kitchen. In the lounge of Midtown Financial Company, Shaun was shirtless and standing in front of the bright floor-to-ceiling windows. After tonight, the building under his feet will no longer exist, and the forces controlled by other fingers of the hand will also follow. It crumbles and disintegrates together. 5 fingers are nothing compared to a fist, Shaun said softly. He turned around and looked at Erica, who was sitting on the bed with her beautiful body half covered by the quilt, and said with certainty, there will only be one leader of the hand in the future, and you, Erica Nakis, exist as Black Sky. Erica, who had messy black hair and crimson cheeks, chuckled. She lost her usual indifference and walked slowly to the man's side. There was a hint of coquettishness in her cold voice. Everything belongs to you anyway. Shaun glanced at the clock on the wall and said calmly, cut off your past, Erica. I should also go see Danny Rand. Open that door and see what the legend says can make people live forever. What does it look like to be immortal and to be resurrected from the dead? Dark clouds covered the night sky, sparse starlight dotted the dark sky, and only a crescent moon reflected the bustling city. Rows of high-rise buildings stand tall and tall, like a steel forest made of reinforced concrete. Against the bright moonlight, they look like a crawling and sleeping giant beast. Under the silent night sky, Daredevil once again put on the Red Devil suit. His body was low on the top of a building, and his extremely developed super senses replaced human eyes, overlooking the noisy city shrouded in the night. Countless long and short sound waves oscillate in the air. The honking of cars, the conversations of pedestrians, and even the sound of the cold wind are all transformed into various messages that are accepted. These complex and trivial information fragments were transformed by Daredevil into clear pictures in his mind. He squatted half-crouched on the top floor of the building, like a dormant hunter, and said in a low voice, many people. There are at least several people in that building. Hundreds of people. They are distributed on different floors, with the most people on the lower floor, including hand ninjas. These people's heartbeats are very slow, so they are easiest to distinguish. Although he is blind, Daredevil's actions are not affected by his unusually sharp senses. He observes the world in another strange way. A signal sounded in the headset, and a rich voice came, the explosives have been installed. There are about 30 blasting points. If they are activated at the same time, this building will look like a castle on the beach, boom. One big wave can destroy them all. The Punisher, who is proficient in explosive raids, has already secretly sneaked into the Midtown Circle Financial Company and planted the time bomb he made. This was his plan. 4 people couldn't cope with the Hand's ninja army, so they decided to blow up the building and destroy the enemy's lair in one fell swoop. According to the information I heard, Alexandra hasn't appeared for a long time. Danny Rand should be locked up in the underground space, right under the big hole dug out. The keel dug by the Hand is also there. Jessica stood on the busy street with her hands in her pockets, like a homeless person. The building standing opposite was the Midtown Circle Financial Company, which was also the secret lair of the Hand. The group of them had already learned the true purpose of the Hand from Stickmin, and also knew that Danny Rand was captured because of his identity as the Kunlun Iron Fist, but what surprised them even more was that this under a bustling area near Manhattan, the remains of an ancient creature were actually buried. Everything the Hand did was to dig it out from the ground. It feels like I'm involved in a third-rate comic book story. The evil villain is willing to destroy a city in order to live forever, and there are only 4 of us, but we have to go beyond our own capabilities to stop their terrorist plot. Jessica chewed gum and laughed helplessly at herself. She just took on the task of investigating a disappearance and helped a housewife find her long-lost husband. However, she ended up getting involved in the conspiracy vortex of an evil organization. This inexplicable development made the extremely capable brunette feel quite unhappy. In addition to being a private detective, it would be nice to work part-time as a heroine. Luke Cage's teasing voice came from the headset. The 4 street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, after several days of careful preparation, are ready to go. They are determined to rescue Danny Rand and destroy the lair of the Hand tonight. Midtown Circle Financial Corporation, conference room. Mrs. Gao, Murakami, Suawanda, and Botu arrived one after another. They received a message from Erica, claiming that Danny Rand had opened the underground door, so they were invited to discuss how to remove the dragon bone remains. Dig it out and transport it to a safe place. The 4 of them looked at each other and had a cryptic exchange with their eyes. Finally, Murakami broke the silence. I have a close relationship with Yashida Pharmaceutical, and we can transport the keel to Japan first. Mrs. Gao nodded in agreement. She also had a deep foundation in Japan. However, Suawanda, who was far away in the African continent, and the fighters who had always fought alone were hesitant. With the death of Alexandra, the Hand originally the 5 major factions have collapsed, and everyone is beginning to want to become the only leader. Erica's taking that position was only a temporary expedient. No one among the 4 was willing to let Black Sky control the Hand. You guys should discuss the plan. The door has been opened and the excavation of the keel can be carried out at any time. Erica said with an indifferent expression. She looked at the 4 people sitting in the conference room coldly, a cold light flashed in her eyes, and the awe-inspiring killing intent in her heart became more intense. You mobilized many ninjas from the Hand tonight to prepare for some big operation? The usually taciturn fighter asked. The other 3 people also turned their attention to Erica. They had also been secretly wary of Haikong, worried that the other party would suddenly take action to get rid of them in order to control the power of the Hand. We have reached a cooperation with Mr. K. He is going to use the power of the Hand to clean up the gangs in Hell's Kitchen. Erica wrote lightly, scanning with a sharp gaze. The fighter who originally raised the question lowered his eyelids and said nothing more. He was just a little wary. After thinking about it carefully, the keel has not been dug out yet, even if the other party wants to do it. I won't take advantage of this moment. The scheming Mrs. Gao stared at Erica. She always felt that some kind of strange change had occurred in Haikong, which made her feel vaguely uneasy. When the 4 people in the conference room were thinking about their own thoughts, a sharp alarm suddenly sounded, and a noisy and boiling sound resounded inside the building. Erica's face changed and she said coldly, "There is an intruder. It must be those restless guys from Hell's Kitchen." Murakami looked gloomy. He didn't want anything to go wrong at this critical moment. Immediately afterwards, the elite ninjas who served as guards reported the situation. Daredevil and others broke into the building and were rushing to the underground space. Everyone who heard the news stood up suddenly, with anger and anxiety in their eyes. Only Mrs. Gao could remain calm. Just catch them all. Suawanda's eyes were sinister. He had long wanted to completely eradicate Daredevil's gang. Botu echoed. Since these people are targeting us, let them know what price they will pay for provoking the hand. Murakami walked out of the conference room first and led his ninjas towards the underground space. At such an important time, the dragon bone remains must not be missed at all. It is related to his own life and the future of the hand. The others followed suit, and Erika walked in the forefront with striding steps, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Just as Shaun expected, the curtain had been raised and the show was about to take place. In the dark and empty underground space, Erika led everyone in the group to ride the elevator all the way down. The sound of fierce fighting could still be heard vaguely. The electric light lines installed on both sides of the rock wall seemed to be cut off, and the lighting miner's lamp flickered erratically. After a few beats, it dimmed and went out. When the elevator reached the bottom, Erika walked in the forefront carrying a sharp short knife. Murakami, who was one step ahead, had already led many ninjas to fight with the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and others. There is Luke Cage. The three people who broke into the hand's lair were surrounded by masked ninjas holding long knives. It seems like one person is missing. Suawanda frowned. He remembered that there was also a burly man in this group of people, who was called the Punisher by the gangsters in Hell's Kitchen. His style of behavior was bloody and violent, which was completely different from ordinary street heroes. A group of ninjas swooped up with long knives, and the blades drew sharp light in the dim space. Luke Cage stood in front of his teammates. The black man with amazing defense was not afraid at all, and the long knives slashed at him. The steel body made a sonorous sound like metal collision. With Luke Cage as a human shield in front of him, Daredevil drew out his short stick and rushed into the battlefield. His target was directly at Murakami, the leader of the ninjas, while Jessica relied on her strange strength to fight against the enemy. Rampant in the surrounding area, this cool girl with black hair and long legs seemed to want to vent all her anger on the hand. She kept waving her fists and knocked down the ninjas who rushed forward one by one. Erika stood there, staring at Daredevil, Matt Murdock, who was fighting fiercely with Murakami. The image of the blind lawyer who yearned for justice and law became increasingly faint in his heart, like an old photo washed away by time, unable to make any waves in his heart. They have embarked on two completely different paths. Erika felt the power of the black sky in her body, and the nostalgia in her eyes gradually faded away, replaced by indifference. Leave him to me. After hearing Erika's order, Murakami immediately got rid of Daredevil and retreated from the battlefield. Erika, hearing a familiar voice, Daredevil, who wanted to take advantage of the victory, stopped. Even though the Punisher told him that Erika would be resurrected by the hand, when his former lover appeared again, he still couldn't restrain the fierceness in his heart. Mood. Matthew, long time no see. Erika called the other party's nickname and approached gracefully. Before Daredevil could be happy about this reunion after a long separation, his expression suddenly changed and he ducked sideways to avoid the sharp sword light. Erika, what are you doing? Matt, under the red demon mask, asked with confusion. Erika did not hesitate to strike the fatal blow with a faint smile on her face, as if what she had just done was just a trivial matter. The girl with black hair and red clothes twirled the short knife in her hand and drew out a bright sword. Matthew, you are still as childish as when I first saw you, always dreaming of a righteous hero. Didn't Gunsu tell you that I am no longer the weak Erika you know? The hand gave me new life, and the black sky gave me new power. I chose another path, no longer need to follow those pedantic rules, hypocritical morals. I have never felt better than now. Erika, don't be like this, I don't want to hurt you. There was pain in Daredevil's tone. He didn't want to be an enemy of his former lover. It's so touching, Matthew, but it's a pity that I really want to hurt you. Erika stepped forward, drawing a sharp trajectory with the short knife, showing no mercy. She had already made her choice. Erika, who had died once, was unwilling to go back to her previous life. Just like Shaun said, a brand new future was waiting for her, so why dwell on the miserable past? The blade tore through the wind, and Daredevil was overwhelmed by Erika's fierce offensive. He hoped to wake up his former girlfriend. They took you away, they turned you into a weapon, you are not Black Sky. You are Erika Nakis. Thank you for your tenderness, Matthew, but I know who I am. The hand didn't turn me into this. I've always been this person. Erika raised a blade with her backhand, and the sharp light tore open Daredevil's red demon suit. Blood seeped out from his abdomen. Matt covered the wound and seemed to want to say something, but was whipped in the leg. After hitting the target, his whole body flew up into the air and hit the rock wall heavily. You were right, I am indeed not Black Sky. The red figure raised his leg and stepped on Daredevil's body, his voice cold. I am the new Eric Inakis. You always wanted to find the light in my heart. I'm sorry to disappoint you. The sharp dagger penetrated directly through Daredevil's abdomen, and a large amount of blood gushed out from the wound. There was no emotion in Erica's eyes. She pulled out the blade without hesitation and turned around to leave. On the battlefield at the other end, Madame Gao, Sawanda, Murakami, Botu and others have already fought with Jessica and Luke Cage. The situation has been out of control. The perfect combination of powerful monster strength and invulnerability, actually temporarily suppressing the hand's side. In the dark and empty underground space, people continued to come down the elevator from above. A team of black-clad bodyguards holding submachine guns joined the battlefield. This was the force arranged by Sawanda. The bright fire flashed violently, and a series of tongues of fire spurted out from the muzzle. The metal bullets tore through all obstacles, and Luke Cage threw away open two masked ninjas, crumble their sharp long knives into a ball of scrap metal, and rush forward against the opponent's powerful firepower. The strong kinetic energy of the metal bullet hit the body with a burst of pain. Although it was not fatal, it also made Luke Cage a little bit unbearable. At the critical moment, a black tear gas rolled into the battlefield, and the irritating smoke suddenly exploded. In the darkness there was a burst of gunfire in the space, and the Punisher jumped down from the elevator, holding a Browning pistol, harvesting fresh lives. After a while, the smoke slowly dissipated, and the scene fell into a stalemate again. There were only 4 liters of the hand and a few soy sauce fish, while a new Punisher was added to the opposite side. The strength of both sides maintained a strange balance. Kokosora, kill them, and never let anything happen to the dragon bone. Murakami couldn't help but shouted when he saw Erica with black hair and red clothes approaching. The red figure waved the short knife, and a head rose into the sky, and blood spurted out like a fountain. Erica didn't even look at the fallen Murakami, as if she had just trampled to death a screaming ant. You long for the dragon bone so much, so I'll let you be buried with it. Erica looked around at everyone present. The dark and empty underground space fell into dead silence for a moment. No one expected that this girl in red, who seemed to be from the hand, would actually behead Murakami with a single blow. This cruel method made the other 3. The leader was speechless for a moment. They looked at each other for a few times and leaned together in perfect understanding. The game is over. There was a hint of sharpness in the cold voice. Erica seemed to feel something and looked at the open stone door. A tall figure stepped out of the darkness, holding the unconscious Danny Rand in his hand. Everyone, it's time to finish. The man's face was covered by a black tactical mask, and his eyes flashed with a deep light. That's the end of tonight's show. Shaun's appearance made the entire underground space stand still for a moment. Whether it was the hand or the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, they all subconsciously held their breath and stared closely at the black figure walking out of the darkness. Full of vigilance and fear, Erica crossed the battlefield gracefully and walked to Shaun's side. The cold girl who had just brutally killed the Murakami leader with a knife was now like a docile kitten. The aloof indifference that made people shy away disappeared. Got to be clean. The scene took on a strange state. When Shaun stepped into the battlefield, the hand and the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen turned out to be the weak side. Give you a chance to leave. Shaun threw the unconscious Danny Rand on the ground like trash, and glanced at the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. Take your partners and go, the game is over. His target is the hand, the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. They have completed their mission. Rather than go to extra trouble, it is better to let the opponent leave automatically. Jessica and Luke Cage looked at each other, and then looked at the Punisher. They were really wary of this man of unknown origin, especially the Punisher, who had been defeated by the opponent twice in a row. He ended up in an embarrassing situation. Where is Daredevil? Seeing Luke Cage holding the unconscious Iron Fist on his shoulder, the Punisher couldn't help but ask about the whereabouts of his other partner. He is lying in a cold corner. I hope that when you find him, he has not died of excessive blood loss. Erica replied calmly. A ruthless woman, he muttered silently in his heart, and the Punisher waved his hand and led Jessica and others out of the battlefield. Watching the street hero disappear into the darkness, Shaun stood in the center of the battlefield as if strolling. The hand slowly retreated to the edge of the rock wall. Their way was blocked by Erica, as if they were trapped in a cage. The beast inside is trying its final, futile struggle. I know what you want to ask. Shaun waved his hand to interrupt Mrs. Gao, who wanted to speak. There is no grudge between us, but it's a pity that you blocked my way. The cold words echoed in the underground space. The man's face was hidden under a black mask, and only a pair of deep eyes stared at everyone present. When I first came to this world, I was just a little person with no foundation. In this huge and prosperous city, I was like a tiny speck of dust. No one would be willing to be ordinary. In order to stand on a higher position and possess the wealth and power that the world is chasing, you have to clear all the obstacles in front of you. I believe you must have experienced such things. Shaun's eyes were calm and his voice was unusually gentle, as if he was not facing a group of enemies, but old friends he hadn't seen for many years. So I wiped out Frank D'Amico's gang, not to fight criminals and punish rapists. Evil, just because I happened to be short of money at that time, and this big drug lord provoked me again, so he and his gang disappeared. The same was true for Kingpin. I needed more funds and property, and it just so happened that this gangster the Emperor was able to provide it to me, so I sent him and Bullseye to hell along the way. Now, I need the hand, can you give it to me? Several leaders of the hand looked at each other. If they weren't intimidated by Haikong's powerful strength, they would have rushed forward immediately and blew Shaun's head off. This man actually made such an unreasonable request confidently, like a polite robber who said to them in a nice voice, "Can you please give me your family property and the woman behind you?" Several centuries of development and growth have created the hand today, a huge organization with footprints all over the world. But now someone actually wants them to hand over their industry and power. Such words, which are like a fantasy, make several leaders of the hand found it inexplicably absurd. Several leaders exchanged glances. They wanted to refuse, but the current situation was stronger than others. Erica alone was enough to wipe out everyone in the underground space, not to mention that there was a mysterious man with unpredictable origins beside her. I am willing to give all my property in the Hand Association to Your Excellency. Mrs. Gao, who has lived for a long time, made a decision immediately, with a smile on her old face, and no trace of reluctance at all. Shaun smiled and nodded. As the saying goes, the old is the wiser. Mrs. Gao was the first to see the situation clearly, so she made a decisive decision. However, the other people were not so decisive. The African warlord Sawanda sneered. It took him centuries of accumulation to accumulate the huge power of the hand. If he loses all this, he will be in the distant African continent. It will be difficult to move forward, and those consortiums with private armed forces and other warlord leaders will not show any mercy to him. There are only two of them. Botu said meaningfully, as if he wanted to encourage others. I gave you a chance. Shaun shook his head with regret. He gently raised his hand, and in the dim space, a red light lit up, like a weak spark. With a whoosh sound, the red beam of light cut through the air and penetrated the instigator's head at an extremely fast speed. Not even a trace of blood flowed out. The scorching temperature directly evaporated the blood. Ignoring the horrified looks of others, Shaun turned to look at Mrs. Gao and whispered, 5 fingers, even if there are 2 left, are a bit too many. The elderly woman's eyes flashed, and she quickly pulled out a slender dagger from the crutch she was leaning on, and inserted it directly into the neck of the African warlord next to her. Sawanda's eyes opened angrily, and her dark face was filled with tears. With a look of disbelief, he seemed to want to say something, but the trachea in his throat was pierced and he couldn't make any sound at all. Amidst the difficult breathing of, "Ho ho," Sawanda fell down with full of unwillingness. A cold feeling spread throughout his body. Before long, his consciousness fell into boundless darkness. It's very exciting. Only smart people can survive to the end of this game. Applause resounded in the empty underground. Among the 5 fingers of the hand, it was this old woman who seemed to be dying, who had the most scheming and means, so she also became the last survivor. Let them sleep together with the keel. Shaun greeted Erica, and Mrs. Gao followed closely, and the 3 of them climbed up the elevator. Half an hour later, Shaun stood in front of the bright floor-to-ceiling windows. The building where the Midtown Circle Financial Company was located heard a loud bang, violent fire and thick smoke rising upwards. In the apartment in the building not far away, Shaun felt a slight vibration. Erica handed over a glass of red wine, and the two of them clinked the glasses gently. The scarlet liquid swayed, rippling with coquettish colors. The standing building exploded from the inside, and turbulent air waves swept across, destroying the solid structure of reinforced concrete. Countless glass fragments fell like rain. This tall building was like a toppling mountain, collapsing and disintegrating with a loud roar. "Here's to this wonderful city." Shaun raised his wine glass from a distance, his eyes shining brightly. The bright sunshine shines on the Baxter Building, and the mottled golden light is inlaid on the steel body of the skyscraper, reflecting the shining light. Shaun stood quietly on the rooftop. The warm sunshine made him feel comfortable, as if his whole body was soaked in a hot spring. The nerves that were tense due to the continuous fighting slowly relaxed. At about 10 o'clock last night, a mysterious shaking and sinking occurred on 59th Street in the Clint district near Manhattan. The mayor's office confirmed that everything was caused by the Midtown Circle Financial Company located in West Midtown. The planning permission standards for construction projects were not met and the demolition was carried out last night. Shaun listened to the report on the TV news with a slight arc at the corner of his mouth. Everything had come to a successful conclusion. Erica became the sole leader of the Hand and received the full support of Mrs. Gao, while Wesley, using the power of the Hand, they completely controlled the business and territory of Hell's Kitchen, and all the disobedient gang leaders were sunk into the Hudson River. Mrs. Gao, who survived by enduring hardships, handed over her property to Erica quite simply, without any sloppiness. This elderly woman indeed has extraordinary wisdom in life. Of course, compared to these financial industries and the development and growth of his own power, Shaun's biggest gain still comes from the remains of the dragon bone buried underground. It is said that the holy object can make people immortal and resurrect. In fact, they are just the skeleton fossils of alien species, which contain huge amounts of life energy, enough to restore people's vitality and extend their lives. Shaun was not like the leaders of the Hand, who yearned for a long life, and even harbored the vain idea of immortality. In his opinion, extending life solely by relying on the remains of dragon bones was equivalent to drinking poison to quench thirst, and it was meaningless. What he pursues is to strengthen himself and sublimate his essence, rather than to survive like a zombie. Shaun recalled that last night in the underground space of the Midtown Circle Financial Company, he deliberately used words to anger the reckless and careless Danny Rand, causing the Kunlun iron fist to mobilize the chi in his body and swing a powerful fist. Hitting the stone door engraved with an ancient seal, as two familiar energies collided with each other, the mechanism set by Kunlun was activated and the door was successfully opened. Danny Rand, who had lost his use value, was knocked unconscious by Shaun. He stepped into the space behind the stone door. In the rich darkness, the skeleton of a huge creature appeared in front of him, as if it had survived thousands of people. Even though the dinosaur was dead thousands of years ago, its huge remains condensed into fossil-like existence over the long years. Standing in front of this huge skeleton, Shaun could still feel the wild atmosphere of hundreds of millions of years ago. Maybe they had visited the Earth countless years ago, just because as time went by, the vicissitudes of life changed and the Earth was covered up, traces of the survival of these alien species. In a period when technology was far from prosperous and developed, Kunlun called them dragons, and their remains were regarded as dragon bones. Shaun stretched out his hand and touched the white bones of the dragon's bones. Suddenly, a huge surge of vitality surged into his body, rising like a tsunami. His tall body trembled, as if every cell exploded in an instant. Once again, I relived the intense pain of drinking the golden potion. An unimaginable torrent of energy surged through human flesh and blood. Shaun bent over in pain, with a faint golden light emitting from his eyes. The vast life energy surged through the body, and every inch of flesh and blood seemed like roasted by flames. The extreme pain squeezed every ounce of potential out of this body. Huge life energy, like a bursting flood, kept raging through Shaun's body. He felt that everything in his body was decomposing crazily and then reorganizing, over and over again, as if a rough embryo was being forged, until this flesh and blood body can adapt to that powerful and pure energy. The consciousness sank into the silent darkness, and the cold feeling of being on the verge of death came over. The memory fragments of the past and present life were intertwined with each other, like fleeting glimpses. In the end, two completely different lives slowly overlapped and merged into one. Shaun suddenly opened his eyes, a pale golden light flashed, and strong vitality surged, making a huge sound like the rolling tide, and his heart beat, dong dong, like a thunderous drum. His body has undergone a huge transformation. Whether it is physical fitness, reaction ability, or muscle density, everything has been significantly improved. This is my biggest gain. Shaun looked at the densely populated Manhattan Island with high-rise buildings and busy traffic, feeling satisfied in his heart. On the system interface in his mind, the progress bar showing the energy has advanced to 25%. The dragon bone remains that the hand coveted directly made Shaun take a huge step, and the energy absorption showed a leap. Spreading his palms, a faint golden light slowly condensed, and Shaun smiled slightly. The huge energy not only caused earth-shaking changes in this body, but also gave him another ability. Energy field. Shaun closed his eyes, and his spiritual power radiated outward. In the dark space of consciousness, various lights intertwined to form a huge and boundless spectrum. The towering steel buildings, the long queues of crowded traffic, the passing pedestrians, everything has lost its original appearance. Countless energy points in the void are like stars twinkling, sometimes surging like waves, sometimes annihilating and being born. In a cycle, he observed the world from a microscopic perspective. Taking a deep breath, the outstretched palm turned like a whirlpool, attracting the energy tide in the void, and a flash of light shot out. The golden light was not conspicuous in sunny weather, and quickly dissipated in the air. This can be regarded as completing the job transition from warrior to mage. Shaun opened his eyes and said with satisfaction, even though energy control is still very basic now, no matter what, he is getting closer and closer to that incomparably powerful Sentinel. In the distant future, he may have to face S.H.I.E.L.D., the Avengers, or even the notorious overlord of the universe. Therefore, the pursuit of power should never end. When the world is in crisis and one's own safety is threatened, it is too sad to just expect superheroes to save oneself. Superheroes are not omnipotent. They also have moments of powerlessness and place their lives and hopes on others. This is not in line with Shaun's character. For a person who lacks a sense of security, only his own strength can maintain inner peace. This is a real and dangerous world. In movies or comics, every time a superhero saves the world and defeats the villain, under these seemingly happy endings, countless innocent people die in despair and obscurity. Even if they are as powerful as Superman in another world cannot always play the role of savior. Shaun looked up at the sky and whispered, "The world needs a sun." The next morning, Shaun drove to the new location of the laboratory on Long Island. The scientific research environment of the State University of New York could no longer satisfy him and Dr. Connors, and some secret experiments that were not convenient for outsiders to know could not be carried out smoothly. Therefore, after completing the cooperation with Osborne Industries, Shaun and Dr. Connors worked together to find a new laboratory. From site selection to planning and design and a series of other matters, it took almost a week to complete it. The new laboratory is located in Long Island, New York, which is surrounded by sea on three sides, has many ports, convenient and smooth transportation, and is adjacent to many institutions of higher learning, such as the State University of New York at Stony Brook, where Shaun is located. This can be regarded as attracting scientific research talents, one of the channels. By the time Shaun returned to Long Island from Hell's Kitchen, the new laboratory had completed the relocation work under the arrangement of Dr. Connors. The original scientific research team and experimental materials were all packed away. At the same time, a large number of people were recruited, and through Shaun and Dr. Connors, who are famous for ALZ-112, are no longer unknown in the scientific world. Especially Dr. Connors, who won the National Medal of Science. He was suddenly in the limelight and was considered by the media to be the Nobel Prize winner next year. A strong contender for the award. Dr. Connors, who was once looked down upon by others and even ridiculed as a mad scientist, is now proud and elated, having washed away the humiliation and depression he suffered for many years. Therefore, this one-armed middle-aged man is also particularly pleased with the completion of the new laboratory. Having your own independent laboratory is what every scientist dreams of. The black car passed through the tree-lined alley, and it didn't take long to reach its destination. In the middle of Suffolk County, Long Island, New York, a striking and majestic building was in sight. Driving through the wide square, Shaun stepped out of the car and looked up at the towering spire-like building. He couldn't help but feel satisfied. It was indeed right to choose Dr. Connors as his partner. This man who had been frustrated in the first half of his life was right. A down-and-out disabled scientist who only cares about scientific research on cross-species inheritance and has no other complex thoughts is easier to control. Shaun stepped inside the laboratory. The high-strength steel beam structure was like a backbone, supporting this huge building. The irregular transparent glass had an extremely outstanding lighting effect. Warm sunlight fell from the dome. It reflects brilliant and colorful light, and when viewed from a distance, it looks like a dazzling crystal palace. After passing the identity verification, Shaun entered the circular corridor on the second floor. People were coming and going in the square below. Staff and interns were walking in a hurry. Occasionally, some people stopped and sat on the benches on the lawn to take a rest. Dense forests cover large villa floors, which are residential areas for wealthy people in New York. "You're finally back." After hearing the news of Shaun's return, Connors rushed over immediately and pretended to complain. "The new laboratory is waiting for you to sign for it, but you left a lot of things behind and disappeared. Harry is about to ring up the phone, and if you don't show up, maybe he'll put a missing person notice in the newspaper." Shaun smiled a little apologetically. "To deal with some personal matters, you can contact Wesley next time you can't find me." The street heroes of Hell's Kitchen and the Hand delayed him for a while. Fortunately, Dr. Connors handled everything, otherwise the new laboratory would not have been built so quickly and could be put into use in the shortest possible time. "Why is Harry so anxious to find me? Is there something wrong with ALZ-112? Shaun and Dr. Connors were walking in the corridor. From time to time, scientific researchers passing by would recognize the two and look at them with respect or admiration. After all, these two people have been active in the headlines of major news pages recently, especially it's Shaun, and he is even called the second Tony Stark. If purely based on his academic status in the scientific community, this is indeed a compliment. That's not true. It's just that a week later, the White House will hold a Department of Defense commendation dinner, and we also received an invitation," Connors explained. Shaun raised his eyebrows, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He smiled and said, "When did we establish a relationship with the Ministry of Defense? Or is it that Harry still doesn't give up and wants to become an arms contractor like Stark Industries?" Dr. Connors shook his head and replied, "Harry just wants to get on the big backer of the Department of Defense. ALZ-112 is about to be put on the market. You know, an estimated 5.4 million people in the United States have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. The number of mute patients is growing rapidly as the population ages. Once ALZ-112 officially enters the medical market, it is expected to receive countless huge orders. How can those established medical companies sit back and watch us steal the market from them? Huge profits often attract a group of nasty flies." Well, these are Harry's exact words. A smile appeared on Connor's dull face. He was just a scientist obsessed with research and knew nothing about the game of capital market. Oh, it seems Harry is feeling the pressure. Shaun knew in his heart that the introduction of ALZ-112 was enough to cause turmoil in the entire market. Moreover, Osborne Industries' entry into the biomedical field would undoubtedly have a negative impact on established medical companies. Pharmaceutical groups pose a considerable threat. After all, Osborne Industries is not a small fish or shrimp. It is a capital giant. Now that it has entered the new market with a fierce attitude, it is bound to cause a bloody storm. Rather than giving themselves another competitor, these powerful capital groups should launch a fierce offensive before their opponents grow, and kill Osborne Industries in advance before it enters the market. Monopolizing the entire market and being the dominant one has always been the ultimate goal pursued by capital groups. Even if there is an anti-monopoly bill, the sword of Damocles, hanging over their heads, they will continue to take advantage of legal loopholes to gain greater profits. Interests. As Marx said, once there are appropriate profits, capitalists will be bold. With a profit of 50%, it will take desperate risks. For a profit of 100%, it will dare to trample all human laws. With a profit of 300%, it will dare to commit any crime and even risk hanging. Danger. Well, it's really hard to rest for a moment. I thought I could give myself a holiday after the new drug comes on the market. Shaun complained. I don't know which capital giant is targeting Osborne Industries, which is about to enter the biomedical field. Shaun frowned. He was now tied to Osborne Industries. The construction of this new laboratory cost him more than half of his own money. To maintain the normal operation of a world-class laboratory, it takes more than a small amount of money. Whatever can be solved, especially as an independent scientific research institution, research funding must be solved by oneself, and according to Shaun's character, he will not allow others to interfere. If ALZ-112 is blocked from entering the medical market, then for Shaun, it will be equivalent to cutting off a steady stream of funding channels. Looks like I have to help Harry. He made up his mind silently. Connors looked at the somewhat lost young man and felt a sense of illusion in his heart. He had felt that he was in a dream more than once, from an unknown professor to a well-known and highly praised scientist. It's like a dream. It was the young man next to him who changed his life. Connors breathed a sigh of relief and said with emotion, Shaun, I have had the same dream repeatedly recently. In the dream, because I couldn't get the job from Osborne Industries, with funding, I took the risk to conduct human experiments with my own body, and turned into a terrifying humanoid lizard. I fell into madness. Thank you, Shaun, if it weren't for your appearance, I might really be like in the dream in that way, he becomes a beast that has lost its mind. The young man listened quietly, with a bright smile blooming at the corner of his mouth, playing with the strings of fate, quietly changing the original trajectory of others. This feeling of being as high as God is indeed intoxicating. Dr. Connors, what you have now is what you originally deserved. Shaun smiled lightly. Connors no longer indulged in the bitter past. He looked at the young man who was radiating warmth like the sun and said, then give our new laboratory a name. As you said, this is the starting point for our future. Umbrella. Shaun pondered for a while, recalling the giant company he had heard about in his previous life that almost destroyed a world, and said with shining eyes, it will become the protective umbrella of this world. Las Vegas, a miraculous city where angels and demons coexist. This golden city located on the edge of the Nevada desert is one of the 4 major gambling cities in the world and has a huge reputation around the world. Many people say that if you are poor and have a few dollars left, go to Las Vegas. If you have too much money to spend, you might be able to experience the chickness of a homeless person by going to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is like this, one side is heaven and the other side is hell. A black Bentley car parked at the gate of the Videla Hot Spring Hotel. As soon as he stepped out of the car, Shaun felt a luxurious atmosphere rushing towards his face. There were clouds of luxury cars, VIPs like rain, and the noisy sound was like a car. The weather in Vegas is the same, making people feel hot. You should bring a female companion to this kind of occasion. It will look boring to attend with a boring person like me. Dr. Connors said jokingly. They came to attend the awards banquet of the Ministry of National Defense. Generally speaking, most of the people who came to the banquet were large enterprises in the military industry, such as arms contractors such as Stark Industries and Hammer Industries. Of course, there are also some financial brokers from multinational groups and well-connected celebrities. Shaun walked into the luxury hotel. The dinner venue was set on the 20th floor. It was guarded by fully armed soldiers and was heavily guarded. Without invitations or guest introductions, it would be impossible for ordinary people to sneak in. The banquet has not yet begun, and the guests attending are walking around in small groups, forming different social circles. The soothing and beautiful music is flowing in the air, and the waiters are walking in the middle of the venue carrying trays, which is just right. Serving champagne to the rich and famous. Hi, Shaun, you are busier than the president in the White House. At least I can still see the president on TV. Harry, who had arrived a few days ago, walked towards him and gave him a warm hug. The young president of Osborne Industries seems to have emerged from the shadow of his father's murder. He has shed his past youthful aura and gradually gives people a mature and steady feeling. Shaun, you don't know, Las Vegas is simply paradise. All hedonistic activities can be found here, food from all over the world, hot and passionate beauties, everything you want. It's really an illusion. Looking at Harry, who had a beaming face and seemed to be a shopping guide chatting endlessly, Shaun silently retracted his previous evaluation. Even though he now shoulders the heavy burden of Osborne Industries, Harry's tendency to pursue pleasure has not changed. I believe that he and Tony Stark should have a common language in this regard. I've been busy choosing a new location for the laboratory and planning the construction. Shaun made an excuse without changing his face. Dr. Connors wouldn't expose him anyway. I heard from Dr. Connors that Osborne Industries' entry into the biomedical field does not seem to be going well. At the mention of this, Harry, who was in high spirits just now, felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on his head, and his whole body suddenly became depressed. It's Watson Company, a long-established company in the biomedical field, known as the Stark Industries of the pharmaceutical industry. If they really target Osborne, unless we can give up some of the benefits, it may be difficult to successfully enter the medical market. They have a deep background or have strong energy. Shaun frowned. The name Watson seemed a bit familiar. Watson Company is a medical giant in the United States. Many senators who visit Capitol Hill are their guests, and they also have a close relationship with the military. ALZ-112 should have passed the clinical trial stage last week and was officially launched on the market, but there were some obstacles in the middle, and there was the shadow of Watson Company behind it. When Harry talked about this topic, he couldn't help but feel a little downcast. Even if his father, Norman Osborn, was alive, he would find it difficult to fight against a behemoth like Watson Company, not to mention that he had just taken over the company not long ago, and it was not easy for him to win. After establishing a firm foothold on the board of directors, I encountered such a huge challenge again. So you want to win over some allies for Osborne Industries? Shaun guessed what Master Osborne was thinking. Harry nodded. Norman Osborn passed away too suddenly, and he did not completely take over the connections that his father had during his lifetime. Now that Osborne Industries has encountered difficult challenges, the only way he can think of is to find someone through interest relationships. Several powerful military officials arrived in hopes of deterring Watson Company. Shaun was silent. Harry's idea was too naive. If he wanted to win over important military officials who held real power, ordinary monetary bribes alone would not be enough. Without real benefits to attract them, how could others possibly win over them? Support the Osborne industrial platform and wave the flag. How many have you found? He asked softly. Harry looked embarrassed, and indicated with his eyes. At first, I found the hawkish general of the military, General Ross. It turned out that he was only interested in the human enhancement potion that Osborne Industries had failed. It is said that he recently called a special. The scientific research team is preparing to replicate the super soldier serum of the last century. In addition to General Ross, I also went out of my way to make friends with several other important military officials. These old guys didn't even give me a good look. They didn't behave like this when they faced Tony Stark. Quote. Harry's words were quite indignant. He didn't understand why that pretentious playboy could get the favor of all the military bosses, but he could only suffer the unfair treatment of cold looks and closed doors. Okay, Harry, Stark has a genius brain that is known to the whole world, and his father is also a participant in the Manhattan Project. He has wide connections and has always been good friends with the military. Shaun patted Master Osborne on the shoulder and said comfortingly, "We'll talk about the Watson Company later. Las Vegas can make you forget all your worries. If you think about it carefully, at least you are better than that flowery one. The young master must be young and handsome. Look at the passionate eyes of those girls." "Ah, I have a girlfriend." Harry tried to struggle internally, but when he saw those hot girls in cool clothes and their vaguely provocative eyes, the second half of his sentence was swallowed up. Throat. Shaun showed a knowing smile that every man understands, and said with a teasing smile, "Don't worry, I won't tell Mary Jane. There is an ancient Chinese philosophy that when you are proud of your life, you should be happy and have fun." Mr. Osborne, who loves fun by nature, hesitated for about 2 seconds, and then threw himself into the warm embrace of Las Vegas with a frustrated mood, just like those passionate and hot girls, as well as all kinds of rich entertainment, can make him forget all worries and pain. "What about you, Shaun? What are you going to do?" Before leaving, the loyal Master Osborne wanted to enjoy life with his friends. "I heard that there is a legend about miracles in this gambling city. If you bring $1 here and put it on the gambling table, you will win double every time, and then put all the money into a new gambling game. If you get lucky 30 times in a row, you will be able to win the entire Las Vegas. Shaun stood in the middle of the banquet and said with a smile, "Now I'm going to try my luck and see if I can win this city." Tony Stark, a dreamer, genius, and patriot. Since his boyhood, as the son of legendary weapons developer Howard Stark, he has quickly attracted people's attention with his extraordinary intelligence. At the age of 4 at that time, he made a circuit board. He built his first engine at the age of 6. He graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology with the highest honors at the age of 17. Dr. Connors stared blankly at the screen, which was showing a documentary proving that Tony Stark was indeed a genius. Didn't they agree to attend the award dinner together? Where did Shaun and Harry go? The middle-aged scientist, who was sitting uneasily in the audience, was filled with 3 ancient philosophical questions at this time. There was a burst of warm applause in the venue, and the representative of the military, Colonel Rhodes, came to the stage to speak. As the military liaison to Stark Industries, I have the privilege of working with a true patriot who is my mentor and friend. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present this year's highest honor to Mr. Tony Stark. Quote. As the words fell, fast-paced music started playing in time, and there was another burst of warm applause. The guests in the audience looked left and right, looking for the figure of this scientific genius. Colonel Rhodes held the trophy and shouted several times, but did not see Tony Stark appear. It was not until he found Obadiah sitting below that he kept shaking his head that he seemed to understand something, with a helpless expression on his face. The top CEO of Stark Industries, Obadiah Stane, stood up quickly, stepped onto the stage to save the situation, and cleaned up Tony's willful behavior. For him, it was almost a daily routine, and people often only saw Stan with a bright and shining genius. Tucker rarely pays attention to whose hard work has allowed Stark Industries, which has experienced 2 generations, to have its current glorious status. Dr. Connors drank champagne, thinking that young people today are really unreliable, disappearing at every turn, even Tony Stark, the protagonist of this party. Shaun, who was separated from Harry, came to the casino on the 16th floor. He rubbed his itchy nose and muttered, "It seems that he has forgotten something important. By the way, where is Dr. Connors? An old man, people are still running around, really." Shaun held a free drink in his hand and wandered aimlessly in the casino, feeling the warm atmosphere of the casino. The noisy sounds were like waves, one after another, continuous. Every year, countless people from all over the world come to Las Vegas. Vegas is just to experience the charm of this world's casino city. Some people have lost everything here and have nothing, while others have seized the opportunity and become rich overnight. As people say, this is a city of miracles where angels and devils coexist. Shaun was playing with a few colorful chips in his hand. Occasionally when he got interested, he would stop and play a few. Just like Harry said, Las Vegas can make people forget all their worries. Wonderful paradise. Provided you have enough chips or banknotes in your pocket, then you are qualified to become the god of this city. After winning several games of blackjack in a row, the chips in front of Shaun had piled up like a mountain. He couldn't help but wonder to himself, if he continued to win, someone in the casino would take him to a small dark room. "These are all yours." Smiling at the hot female dealer, Shaun picked up a few chips and prepared to get up and leave. "Man, you're so generous." A bearded man in a burgundy shirt spoke out. He had just lost several games in a row and was currently looking for comfort in the 2 tall girls. "A little tip for gambling: when you are lucky, you should learn to share it." Shaun turned and leaned on the gambling table. "I feel like I caught the skirt of Lady Luck tonight." The man with the mustache raised his brows, seemingly unwilling to admit defeat. He took off his sunglasses and said, "Why don't you try the roulette game and see whose side Lady Luck is on tonight? When it comes to being attractive to women, I have never lost to anyone." He added confidently. Half an hour later, the mustached man had an expression of disbelief on his face, so that the 2 beautiful girls beside him could not attract his attention at all. "You have won 13 games in a row. According to the mathematical probability, this is almost impossible." "Possible." "No, including the round just now, there are 14 in total." Shaun corrected calmly, "It seems that Lady Luck prefers my one tonight." The man with the mustache looked embarrassed. He had spoken confidently before, but in the end he slapped himself in the face, which made him somewhat embarrassed. As for how much money he lost, he didn't care at all. If he wanted to, he could even buy the hotel. Well, I have to admit that all the good luck in Las Vegas is converging on you tonight. The bearded man buried his head in his female companion's plump breasts. After taking a few deep breaths, he regained his composure. He turned to the bodyguard behind him and said, "Happy, give me a bigger bargaining chip." "Do you want to continue? I already have so many chips that I don't know how to spend them." Shaun shrugged. A small mountain was piled up in front of him. He felt the jealous or resentful eyes of the gamblers around him and felt an inexplicable sense of relief. Feelings arise spontaneously. You can just give it all to the dealer like you did before. The man with the mustache chuckled. Seeing the tall and round male dealer looking at him with expectant eyes, Shaun couldn't help but look disgusted and simply rejected the proposal. It's a pity that not every dealer has a pair that makes people unable to move away. Legs with eyes. The man with the mustache looked at Shaun with a comrade's eyes. Just as he was about to share his thoughts on the female figure, a black man in a straight military uniform walked through the crowd and walked over, with a look of guilt on his dark face, expression. "Who told me that if I gave someone an award, he would be deeply honored?" asked the black man with the rank of colonel. "Of course, I will definitely feel honored to have the young and promising Colonel Rhodes present the award to me. Well, have the awards begun? I can't wait to go on stage to receive the award." The mustached man's superb acting skills at this time were enough to win him a statuette. Unfortunately, as a good friend, Colonel Rhodes didn't buy it and directly raised the trophy in front of him. "I've already brought it to you." "Wow, that saves trouble. You are so considerate." The bearded man tried hard to show that he was moved, but the arm that gradually climbed up the waist of the female companion, Water Snake, had already betrayed his inner thoughts. "How about the last one?" the man with the mustache asked unwillingly. He wanted to win no matter what. He didn't believe that the goddess of luck really favored this young boy so much. "You have lost enough tonight, Mr. Stark." Shaun smiled slightly. He had long recognized this rather bohemian man with a mustache as the famous Tony Stark. "He's right, Tony. We have an important journey tomorrow, so we can't be late." Colonel Rhodes knew his friend's style very well. If he continued, he would definitely not be able to see him on the plane on time tomorrow. Popping out a chip in his hand, Shaun said with some meaning, "I wish you a safe journey, Mr. Stark." "I think he looks familiar." Tony frowned, feeling a little strange as he looked at the back of the young man who had made him lose all night. Shaun Cypers, Happy, the bodyguard standing behind him, reminded him quietly. The young man who was hailed as the second Tony Stark in the newspapers is also said to be a genius scientist. The newly invented genetic drug is worth billions of dollars. He has reached a cooperation with Osborne Industries. This period the newspapers were all about him. Tony picked up a glass of champagne from the gambling table and snorted disdainfully, "The second Tony Stark. There is only one me in this world, unique." The billionaire casually placed a few bets, and then seemed to lose interest in continuing to play. Surrounded by his friend Rod and a group of bodyguards, he swaggered out of the hotel. This period was Tony's most proud day. After the prodigal son returned at the age of 21 and took over the position of CEO of Stark Industries, he was regarded as the darling of the media. No matter how many hot models he slept with, or what new weapons he invented, reporters always swarmed him immediately, like sharks smelling blood. At this time, Tony Stark was indulging in a life of extravagance and wealth, feeling the glory that everyone was seeking. Apart from inventions and creations, nothing could attract his attention more than beautiful women. There are many young geniuses, but there is only one Tony Stark. The mustached man praised himself without hesitation. Colonel Rhodes next to him was already used to his friend's narcissism. Who knows what he said is indeed the truth? No matter how many shortcomings Tony has, they often give military bosses headaches, but there is no doubt about his genius. Don't underestimate that young man. He was a 20-year-old genius scientist who invented genetic drugs worth billions. He was the best student at the State University of New York. Some even say that he and Dr. Connors created a new era of biopharmaceuticals in the United States. Era is a strong contender for the next Nobel Prize. Colonel Rhodes added. At Shaun's age, he has achieved what he has achieved today. He is indeed young and promising, with a bright future. Tony, who was surrounded by everyone, smiled contemptuously. He was at the peak of his life, so how could he listen to the advice of his friends? He laughed and said, "If his mind is half as good as gambling, then I am reluctantly willing to admit that he is a gambler. Genius. 20-year-old genius scientist. Invented genetic medicine worth billions." Tony put his arm around Rhodes' shoulders, with a hint of excitement on his face after drinking. "I took over as Stark when I was 21. Industry has made it the most powerful arms giant in this country, and it also controls tens of billions of properties. All his achievements seem insignificant in front of me. The men of the Stark family have always been the best, that." Rhodes shook his head helplessly, turned to Happy and said, "Take good care of him and don't let him be late tomorrow." In this world, there are usually only two types of people who can communicate with Tony normally, either scientists who also have a genius mind, or beautiful beauties who can't control their inner impulses. Colonel Rhodes, who did not belong to any of these people, could only silently pray that this trip to the front line in Afghanistan could be completed smoothly, and that Tony would not cause anything. As that Tony Stark, Connors walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the mustachioed man who was flirting with a beautiful reporter. This billionaire who inherited Stark Industries at a young age not only made headlines every day in tabloid scandals, also has a prominent reputation in academia, especially in the field of weapons manufacturing, with outstanding achievements and can be called an authoritative figure. Well, an interesting guy who lives in his own spiritual world. Shaun commented with a smile. "Speaking of which, I won a lot of money from Mr. Stark tonight. I can afford the presidential suite in the hotel thanks to his generosity." Connors smiled faintly. In his eyes, the young man next to him was as talented as Tony Stark. The decay rate algorithm that he had not solved for many years was easily solved by Shaun, which brought him fame. The ALZ-112 with interests is the outstanding work of the other party, and I only made some trivial improvements. Connors actually disagrees with the media and newspapers' evaluation of Stark as second. He believes that sooner or later, Shaun will become a big man standing side by side with Tony Stark. Getting rid of the strange thoughts in his mind, Dr. Connors asked softly, "Where did you and Harry go? It's more painful for me to deal with those celebrities and rich people at the banquet alone than for me to perform on stage." Because ALZ-112 failed to be launched quickly, Harry felt a little depressed. "I asked him to put aside all his worries and release his inner pressure in Las Vegas." Shaun smiled strangely. In the luxurious suite next door, Harry was fighting several passionate and charming girls alone. "I hope he can still get up tomorrow morning." Connors, who had been single for half his life, was speechless. In the end, he could only sigh with emotion. Young people are in great health. Fortunately, the hotel room was well soundproofed, which was enough to save Shaun from a night of brain-piercing demonic sounds. After chatting with Dr. Connors for a few words, the middle-aged scientist returned to his room. Shaun stood alone in front of the window, looking at the bustling city with bright lights in the night. He didn't expect that this trip to Las Vegas would actually allow him to meet the future Iron Man. Judging from the timeline, Tony Stark should be going to the front line in Afghanistan to promote the company's new weapons. As a result, he was kidnapped by terrorists. If the trajectory of fate has not changed due to the butterfly effect, then Iron Man will be born soon. Wouldn't it be more interesting if Tony Stark died in the attack and did not become Iron Man because of his arrival in this world, causing the butterfly's wings to flap? Shaun thought with malice. As for deliberately getting on the line with Tony Stark, or participating in the plot, saving the billionaire, in order to win the other person's favor and gain a step up, this kind of idea didn't happen to him. Wouldn't even consider it. The goal he longs for is to carve out his own path, without relying on any superheroes or taking orders from S.H.I.E.L.D., maybe they will all become his enemies in the future. If he wants to get rid of the constraints of rules and regulations, except for his own powerful in addition to strength, one must also possess sufficient power and wealth. These are the cornerstones of status in human society. Besides, this arrogant playboy is not a good choice for a partner. Tony is neither as easy to control as Dr. Connors, nor is he an easy-to-manipulate character like Harry. The collision between Shaun's strong character and Stark's arrogance will only cause unnecessary conflicts. Instead of cooperating with the future Iron Man, it is better to control everything by himself. He looks forward to Umbrella taking root in this world and growing stronger. Shaun watched with cold eyes as Tony got into the car with the beautiful reporter, with an indifferent arc on his lips. This is the beginning of all timelines. The gathering of superheroes, the clues and whereabouts of the 6 gems, all start from here. Have a nice trip, Tony, he said silently in his heart. Watson Tower, Midtown Manhattan. This towering steel giant stands in the world's largest skyscraper concentration area, standing side by side with the Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, and Chrysler Building, becoming a beautiful landscape in the economic and cultural center of this country. Marcus Watson strode into the conference room. As the helmsman of a large multinational company, Marcus, who celebrated his 60th birthday last week, still looked energetic and had an air of self-reliance. The superior person is imposing and majestic, like a lion entering its twilight years. A young genius who has been praised to the sky by the media, and a mediocre and incompetent company heir. They are like newborn calves. They are ignorant and fearless and want to rush into the field of biomedicine and invade Watson's empire, but you have not half a way. Marcus slammed a copy of Vanity Fair magazine onto the table. It showed a young man with dark hair and a bright smile. The subtitle, "Creating a New Era for the American Pharmaceutical Industry," was particularly dazzling. I invest billions of dollars every year to develop new drugs, but the result is a gradual shrinking of market share. A young man who is only 21 years old invented a cure for brain degeneration in a university laboratory. Genetic medicine, tell me, gentlemen present, aren't you ashamed? Faced with Marcus Watson's scolding, the senior managers of various departments in the conference room did not dare to refute at all, and all lowered their heads. They all knew the strong style of the leader Watson. The title of tyrant, circulated in private, is not a simple talk. Marcus's majestic eyes swept over and found that everyone was silent, not daring to say a word, and a burst of anger surged in his heart. This lion-like old man has been in charge of this large enterprise for nearly 30 years. He has been committed to building Watsonton into a monopoly giant in the industry, dominating the entire industry with an unstoppable attitude and possessing absolute control. The right to speak, just like what Stark Industries does, monopolize the huge cake, occasionally leaking some leftovers from your fingers for others to fight for. This is just hype from the outside media. Osborne Industries failed to transform into the military industry, and because Norman Osborn was killed, the stock price fell avalanche. The reason why Harry Osborn, who inherited the company, released his genes, the news about the drug, is just to stabilize the company's stock price and his position on the board of directors. A middle-aged man wearing glasses mustered up the courage to say that when they heard that Osborne Industries was preparing to enter the biomedical industry, the senior management of Watsonton Company did not take it to heart at all and develop a new drug to cure diseases. The time and money required is simply unimaginable. Osborne Industries claims that a young man in his 20s who has not yet graduated from college has actually invented a genetic drug that can comprehensively cure brain degeneration. This is undoubtedly a fantasy. Not everyone is a genius like Stark, not to mention that Tony's achievements are inseparable from the support and help of Stark Industries. This is no longer an era where you can gain something by just sitting alone in a simple laboratory and immersing yourself in research. Modern science pays more attention to teamwork and requires massive investment of funds, especially in the biomedical industry. The advent of any new drug requires a lot of people behind it. All have huge teams and support from giant companies. Mr. Hamilton, I disappoint you. My enthusiastic friends at the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, told me that the effect of this genetic drug is very miraculous. It has entered the clinical trial stage and will be officially launched on the market soon. Marcus was expressionless and said coldly, "Do you know that conservative estimates from the outside world suggest that once this genetic drug is launched, it will be worth at least $4 billion. Feeling the compelling gaze of the company's helmsman, Hamilton's vest was soaked with cold sweat. He had not conducted an in-depth investigation of this new drug at all, thinking that it was just a commercial hype by Osborne Industries. This company can survive in the biomedical industry by constantly making progress and occupying more markets like a pack of wolves. The long period of comfortable life has made you all lose your enterprising spirit. Even Stark Industries has, and with competitors like Hammer Industries and Cross Technology, who has Watson to stop its progress. Marcus's tone was stern. In the past few years, due to personal matters at home, he had relaxed his management of the company. Otherwise, how could Osborne Industries have so easily come up with the idea of entering the medical and biological industry? As early as Harry Osborne's, as soon as the young man releases the news, he will give him a thunderous blow with fierce means. Spreading public opinion that genetic drugs have side effects that cannot be ignored, contacting Shaun Cypers privately and acquiring the drug formula from him, attacking the stock price of Osborne Industries, using interests to incite the board of directors to rebel and remove Harry Osborne as president positions. There are so many business tools to use. Compared with Marcus Watsonton, a capital tycoon with tough skills and sophisticated vision, the young president of Osborne Industries, and the young man praised as a genius by the media, are like eagles that have not yet fully fledged. Likewise, there may be a day in the future when they can spread their wings and fly, but before that, they are just objects that can be manipulated at will. If Osborne Industries wants to enter the biomedical industry, there is only one way, and that is to succumb to Watsonton's will. Many senior managers in the conference room nodded in agreement. Mr. Hamilton, who was in charge of market operations, immediately said, "I will go and talk to Shaun Cypers. Although he has signed a contract with Osborne Industries, but the new drug has not yet been launched, and we can completely cut it off. As long as that young man agrees to sell the formula, Osborne Industries will be completely defeated. Either find a way to get a few senators to express their views on the harm of genetic drugs and trigger public attacks, or find a few patients in clinical trials and claim that they have allergic reactions or other physical discomforts. As long as they work well, we can drag Osborne Industries into the legal quagmire." The senior managers who were previously timid and did not dare to speak loudly became active now. With the huge power of Watsonton Company, they may not be able to defeat Osborne Industries, but it is easy to prevent them from entering the medical biological market. The foundation and accumulation of a monopoly giant in an industry are beyond what others can imagine. Even if it is a behemoth like Stark Industries and rashly moves into the medical and biological industry, it must take the initiative to share interests with Watsonton Company, otherwise as a company Marcus Watsonton at the helm will never let the opponent in easily. The cake is always limited. If you want to maintain your position, you must control the competitors in the market and never let other predators enter. Every predator at the top of the food chain is enemy. Seeing his employees offering suggestions one after another, Marcus's cold face relaxed. The mere Osborne Industries and a talented scientist who became famous at a young age could not shake Watsonton's solid position. He was just using the topic to play. "By the way, I plan to rectify the laziness within the company. Okay, the task of stopping Osborne is left to you. I just want to see a satisfactory result." Marcus interrupted the heated discussion in the conference room. He waved his hand and asked what he was most concerned about. "Where is the research in the Watson laboratory?" Using the purpose of drawing a genetic map, we ordered our affiliated medical institutions to conduct blood sampling on the entire East Coast. We are currently halfway through the process. As for the director in charge of the scientific research department flickered his eyes and looked at the boss hesitantly. Marcus waved the others to leave the conference room, and the head of the scientific research department continued, "Research on drugs that suppress mutant genes is not going well. Those genes that make mutants different are extremely stubborn and almost impossible to eradicate or eliminate. The initially developed inhibitory agent can only maintain a short-term effect." Watsonton's helmsman sat down, his strong and majestic face showing a trace of fatigue, like an aging lion standing on the hill, looking at the sunset, exuding an aura of old age. "Continue to research. I have invested so much money, and I must get a perfect result." Marcus's attitude was firm, as if he was decisive. The scientific research director who nodded hastily did not understand the boss's thoughts at all. Genetic drugs that suppress mutants have no profit space for the company. Could they be sold to the military as weapons? Compared with the huge amounts of money invested, the lack of market prospects for mutant suppressant drugs cannot be compensated by orders from the Ministry of Defense alone, and may even lead to unwarranted disasters. Could Marcus Watsonton, who is famous for his outstanding vision, see this? Not clear about the nature of the matter. The scientific research director, who vaguely guessed something, wisely kept silent. Smart people sometimes shouldn't ask too many questions. Even if they get to the bottom of the truth, they shouldn't think too much. When the conference room returned to silence, the lion-like old man thought of his son and angrily cursed, "Mutants." Warm sunlight penetrated the clouds and shone on the earth. On the spacious lawn, researchers taking off their work uniforms walked back and forth, enjoying champagne and barbecue on the long dining table. This was an open-air reception to celebrate the official establishment of the laboratory. It was proposed by Shaun himself. The waiters arranged the tables and chairs neatly, arranged the tableware, and set up the grills. In this sunny weather, Ambry Law's staff were in a happy mood, enjoying the benefits provided by the young boss. The brand new laboratory is a towering minaret-like building, like the majestic tomb of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs. The whole is made of high-strength glass, supported by a backbone-like steel beam structure. When the weather is fine, the sunlight shining down through the glass dome, it looks like a shining crystal palace. The external construction is also complete, including underground parking lots, wide aprons, and other leisure facilities and entertainment venues, all of which are available. This laboratory named Umbrella has used up almost all the funds that Shaun held. If Wesley hadn't controlled many businesses in Hell's Kitchen, and with the secret support of the Hand, I'm afraid that he, the youngest billionaire at New York University, has fallen into the dilemma of a broken capital chain. Shaun wanted to build a world-class scientific research institution, so he needed a world-class scientific research team. He left the recruitment to Dr. Connors, and he gave a list of outstanding scientists he remembered. The net has been cast out, and I don't know how many big fish can be caught. After a huge effort, the results are naturally satisfying. Shaun stood on the lawn in a straight suit, holding a glass of champagne in his hand, as if admiring a wonderful painting, slightly raising his head and looking at the dazzling laboratory building. A sense of satisfaction arises from the bottom of my heart. This magnificent pyramid-like building is a private palace that belongs entirely to Shaun, and he will take the first step in his career from here. It feels like watching your own child, from the first cry after it is born, to learning to walk, and gradually growing up and turning into a strong young man. Connors dressed formally and poured out the contents of the cup. The champagne was drained in one gulp. This normally taciturn middle-aged scientist, perhaps stimulated by alcohol or because of his inner excitement, changed his previous dullness and became extremely talkative. "Doctor, I thought you would be hiding in the laboratory at this time. I heard that the research on cross-species inheritance has reached a critical stage." Shaun patted Connors on the shoulder and asked in a friendly manner. "I really wasn't used to this kind of occasion before, but today is different. This is the most glorious moment in my life, and I have to attend." Connors looked at his empty sleeve, with a lot of emotion in his tone. "It's still. I want to thank Dr. Zhao Helen for your recommendation. She is indeed the most outstanding biologist I have ever met. With her participation in cross-species inheritance, progress will be accelerated a lot." "Except Dr. Helen Zhao from South Korea, is there anyone else who can give an answer?" Shaun and Connors sat under the white parasols set up, with the mellow aroma of wine floating in the air, the soothing and quiet music flowing quietly, feeling the warm sunshine in the afternoon, and one could not help but be intoxicated by the beauty of this moment. In the atmosphere, the young genius who graduated from Columbia University, Reed Richards, rejected Umbrella's invitation. "In fact, he is not suitable for us. He observes cosmic storms, collects data on violent and chaotic ray flows, and then deciphers human genes. No matter what the prospects of this project are, its initial investment is too huge. Not only does it require unimaginable huge funds, but it also requires renting a spacecraft from the space agency to go to space in person." Connors shook his head. He was not optimistic about the famous genius Reed Richards' experimental project at all. It was full of too many variables, the possibility of failure was extremely high, and from an investor's point of view, there was no profit margin. And the value is not great. "Okay, Mr. Richards is out." Shaun smiled faintly. It was a pity that he did not win over the future Mr. Fantastic. "How about Dr. Otto Octavius? I remember that he is an independent scientist and would be interested in invitations from scientific research institutions." Independent scientists generally mean lack of funds and experimental equipment, and will rarely refuse to join an emerging scientific research institution. Dr. Otto is still considering it. "Do you have the idea of entering the energy field?" Connors asked doubtfully. "Currently, the Umbrella Laboratory is conducting biomedical research projects, such as the development of genetic drugs and the overcoming of cross-species inheritance. Dr. Otto is a famous nuclear physicist who specializes in atomic energy, seems to have been conducting theoretical research on artificial suns in recent years, and is preparing to develop a cheap and efficient new energy source. No, I'm just interested in his new energy source, Shaun said softly. Mr. Fantastic may be able to let it go, but Dr. Octopus must hold it in his hands. Dr. Otto, who wanted to create a new type of energy, lost his beloved wife due to a failed nuclear fusion accident in the original timeline, and became one with the mechanical tentacles controlled by artificial intelligence. Gradually lost my mind. Since then, the outstanding scientist Otto has become a dangerous supercriminal, known as Dr. Octopus. I will continue to contact Dr. Otto, but the people on your list are involved in various fields. Even if they join Umbrella, they will not be able to play their role. Connors gently reminded him that he was afraid that Shaun would become famous at a young age, and the sudden honors and praise would make this gentle and humble young man lose himself. The scientific world has always been a place that values results. You cannot gain a long-term foothold by relying on temporary fame or research results. Why is Tony Stark called a genius? Because he can always come up with one novel theory after another, no matter it is in many fields such as high-tech weapons and artificial intelligence research and development. He can be regarded as an absolute authority. For example, Ms. Maya Hansen, she is a botanist, and Eric Selvig, he studies astrophysics. They may be outstanding in their professional fields, but they are not suitable. Umbrella. This newly emerging laboratory is still a young baby that has not yet grown up. If it steps too fast, it may fall heavily. Listening to Dr. Connors's kind advice, Shaun did not explain too much. This one-armed middle-aged man, who originally had the title of Dr. Lizard, has been pulled onto Umbrella's chariot, and what he has to do is to gather more people under his command and let them use their outstanding scientific research capabilities to provide services for the various ideas in their heads. In this dangerous and wonderful world, the power of technology cannot be ignored. The Iron Man of the future is the best example. Tony Stark, who is mortal in body, relies on his genius brain to design the constantly improving Mark series armor. It can even compete with powerful monsters like the Hulk. Doctors, they are all outstanding talents. Our goal is to build Umbrella into the world's top scientific research institution, so we naturally need the top team. The people on this list are all solid in realizing our future blueprint, Cornerstone. Shaun looked at the crowds of people on the lawn, looking across the green forest in the distance with a deep gaze. Don't think about stopping, we can have more. Chapter 64. What were you talking about with Dr. Connors just now? After sending away the worried Connors, Gwen, wearing casual clothes and her long blonde hair in a ponytail, came closer. The blonde girl, who had just been promoted from an intern to a researcher, joined Umbrella with her mentor Connors. She walked up to Shaun with a glass of juice, wrinkled her nose and said, "It's been a long time since you last met. Appeared in class, young billionaire, be careful of failing the exam at the end of the semester. I disappoint you, Miss Stacy." A smile appeared on Shaun's lips. I only need to earn enough credits to graduate from this school, and as a genius, how can I worry about failing? The problem of science. As classmates, the two teased each other. Since Osborne Industries' press conference, Shaun has become a man of the hour at the State University of New York, a young billionaire and a genius scientist with a promising research result. The exaggerated reports in the media and newspapers, as well as the deliberate promotion of Osborne Industries, put a dazzling halo on the head of this young man. I heard that Principal McCann also wants you to be the guest speaker at this year's opening ceremony. Gwen asked curiously, sucking on the juice. Shaun shrugged and said calmly, "Maybe this is just a little return from the principal when he heard that I wanted to donate a library to the school. HMPH, even the principal has been bribed by you. Be careful, I will report you." Gwen frowned, then clenched by Shungshung's fist, deliberately making a fierce expression, which made her look more delicate and cute, exuding a youthful and lively atmosphere. As the daughter of the New York City Police Commissioner, Gwen is not a delicate flower in the greenhouse. She certainly understands the true face of the world. The society composed of adults is always full of various transactions and compromises, as well as the relationship between interests, exchange between them. Therefore, This innocent blonde girl did not have any objection to Shaun's straightforward words. Of course, this did not exclude personal feelings. It feels like everyone has become different. Staring at Shaun's young face, Miss Stacy felt inexplicably. Harry inherited the family business and worked hard to learn how to run the company. The last time I saw him at that time, I almost didn't recognize it. And Peter, he seemed to be very busy all the time. Whether at school or elsewhere, he always looked like he was in a hurry. Sometimes he would actually fall asleep during class, and he would often be called on by the teacher. Shaun chuckled in his heart. While Peter was busy with his studies and part-time job at the Daily Bugle, he also had to be a good neighbor in New York. He transformed into Spider-Man to fight criminals and maintain law and order. He changed different identities during the day and night, which made Peter physically and mentally exhausted. Tired, especially the complicated romance between him and Mary Jane and Harry, it became a situation that the young Spider-Man didn't know how to deal with. "You are the one who has changed the most, Shaun." Gwen covered her mouth and chuckled. "Everyone is saying that Shaun Cypers is a genius, but I still remember the first time you entered Dr. Connors in the laboratory. He can't even rinse the flask, he looks clumsy." Shaun, whose dark history was exposed, coughed twice and stared at Gwen with piercing eyes. The other party seemed to feel the burning gaze, and 2 red clouds appeared on her cheeks. "You also forgot about one person, the carefree Miss Stacy, who is now an official reserve scientist." "Dr. Gwen, haha, that sounds pretty good." Gwen became angry after being teased. Regardless of continuing to maintain the image of a lady, she began to chase Shaun, who turned around and ran away. The rest of the staff were still cheering on the side. After they joined Umbrella, they discovered that this person known as S. the young boss, Tucker too, is not at all as arrogant and difficult to get along with as Stark. On the contrary, he is very approachable and even makes some jokes with everyone in private. "Hello, Mr. Cypers," an annoying voice interrupted. "I am Wilt Hamilton from Watsonton Company." Shaun frowned. He looked at the middle-aged man in front of him who reported his family name. He was wearing a suit and leather shoes, and his hair was meticulously combed. He exuded the calm demeanor of a successful person, but there was a hint of arrogance in his eyes, especially when he said he was from Watsonton. He had a hint of condescension. Of course, Mr. Hamilton didn't know that his subtle expressions were all seen by Shaun. He thought that this young man who was praised by the media was just a lucky guy who happened to discover the genetic medicine through experiments, formula, thereby gaining huge fame and benefits. As a representative of a pharmaceutical company, Hamilton is well aware of the cost and effort required to invent a new drug. Even the world's top scientific research team takes a long time, and may not be able to make a discovery. A young man who has not yet graduated from college, and a disabled scientist who is so poor that he can only teach in school, can they complete the research and development of genetic drugs? Hamilton hid his inner disdain and said in a rather serious tone, "Mr. Cypers, I want to talk to you on behalf of Watsonton Company." Gwen, who was closely leaning against Shaun, returned to her reserved posture in front of others, smiled sweetly, then turned and walked away. Watsonton Company. Shaun's eyes flickered. After some simple greetings, he learned the other party's intention. He sat under a white parasol with the representative from Watsonton and said with pretense of regret, "I have signed a contract with Osborne Industries. If I violate the contract, I will not only have to pay a huge amount of liquidated damages, and also face jail time. None of this is a problem." Hamilton showed a confident smile and whispered, "Mr. Cypers, you know that Watsonton is a pharmaceutical company with a profound foundation and a leader in the industry. Its position is unshakable, and owes the industry as too young. I'm not saying being young is bad, it's dynamic and full of life, but it also means a lack of support and a lack of stability. And as far as I know, the new president of Osborne Industries has made mediocre business achievements. The reason why he is able to sustain Osborne Industries, which is in danger, until now is all because of the genetic drugs you developed, Mr. Cypers. The company's falling stock price was temporarily stabilized, and I finally breathed a sigh of relief." Shaun deliberately made a modest expression, but the smile on his lips could not be concealed. "No, the person who turned the tide is Harry. He saved Osborne Industries. I just did some trivial work." Hamilton knew in his heart that he was another guy without self-awareness. As a senior manager in charge of market operations, He had seen many people like Shaun achieve achievements that others could not achieve at a young age and indulged in the praise. Thought that he was really a genius who could change the world, but he suddenly woke up until he suffered a cruel blow from reality and saw the dark side of the industry. I heard that Mr. Cypers, you hold part of the shares of Osborne Industries. Watsonton's representative asked deliberately. Shaun looked at the eager-looking Hamilton and couldn't help but sneer in his heart. This seemingly enthusiastic Watsonton pharmaceutical representative just wanted to betray Osborne and kill a powerful competitor in advance. On the one hand, he held private talks with himself to try to obtain the secret formula of genetic drugs, and on the other hand, he secretly blocked the launch of Osborne's new drug. If Shaun agreed to sell the formula, Watson could be the first to get ALZ-112 approved and put on the market. By that time, all the efforts made by Osborne will be in vain. The enthusiasm and compassion of these pharmaceutical companies are nothing but crocodile tears, a disguise used to paralyze prey and make them relax their vigilance. When you show your unprepared state of relaxation, you will be viciously devoured immediately. If they were really so kind, the cost of medical care in this country would not be so high. Those poor people who can only live on relief funds cannot even enter the hospital. Expensive medicines and medical services prohibit them. Those shares are held jointly by Dr. Connors and I, Shaun corrected. Hamilton smiled mysteriously. He thought he had seen the young lucky man clearly, and said in an inflammatory tone, I noticed that Dr. Connors rarely appeared. He spent most of his time in the laboratory, whether it was for press releases or yes, you still have to deal with interviews with media reporters, it seems like you are taking care of it. Dr. Connors has passed the golden age of a scientist, and you are still young and have a brighter future. The representative of the medical company is like a Wall Street stockbroker, following the temptations and introducing the prey step by step, trap. But, Harry is my friend. Shaun pretended to be unsure, as if he was a little moved, wavering between the boundaries of morality and conscience. If Hamilton had read Stanislavski's works, he would probably have discovered that the young man sitting opposite him had an expression that seemed full of hesitation and tangle, but in fact he had no fluctuations in his heart and his eyes were indifferent. Shaun, this is New York. Everyone is looking for opportunities in this city, but not everyone can succeed. Hamilton leaned on his chair and pointed out with a senior attitude, maybe you have more talent than ordinary people. More outstanding talents, but New York has never lacked geniuses. Tony Stark, Reed Richards, they were once brilliant geniuses. But look at the gap between the two of them. One is popular no matter where he goes, while the other is still struggling to find research funds. Is Mr. Richards not as smart as Stark? No, because later investors rely on Stark Industries, a huge military industry giant that can provide a steady stream of funds and the best scientific research environment. Hamilton patted Shaun on the shoulder, as if admonishing the young man, and said meaningfully, there are very few opportunities in life. Once you find them, you must seize them in time. The reputation of a genius is not valuable, at least in New York. Shaun dealt with the Watsonton medical representative casually, and the two sides interacted with each other. Perhaps because of their superb acting skills, the two of them actually had a very good conversation. From a distance, uninformed people thought that he and Hamilton were good friends who talked happily. Who would have guessed that, in fact, both parties had their own thoughts and hidden agendas. You can contact me at any time. Watsonton will definitely give you a satisfactory price. There is a saying on Wall Street that I agree with. Everything in the world can be clearly priced. Before leaving, Hamilton smiled. He could see that Shaun was already moved, but he couldn't let go of his attitude for the time being. He didn't know how many times he had seen this kind of hypocritical person who wanted to gain benefits while pretending to be noble. At the beginning, everyone spoke of their moral conscience and looked like a resolute defender of justice, but in the end, not everyone succumbed to the magic of money and willingly became a money-making machine for pharmaceutical companies. I believe you will make the right choice. Hamilton waved goodbye. Of course. Shaun nodded and turned around with a disdainful smile on his lips. The golden light flashed in the young man's eyes. He looked up at the sun that was emitting warm light, and his eyes gradually became cold. Watsonton Company is preparing to take action against Osborne Industries, which is entering the biomedical industry. Of course, he is the best target to attack. As long as he is willing to privately sell the secret formula to the pharmaceutical company represented by Hamilton, then he is behind Osborn's back. With a heavy stab, this family business, which had finally returned to the right track from the edge of the cliff, would immediately fall into the abyss and end up in a tragic end. Harry will naturally lose the business empire he built in the hands of his father because of this. From a young and rich CEO of a group, he will fall into the dust and have nothing. As for what Shaun gets, he will face the prosecution of Osborn Industries and suffer the pitiful end of being ruined and imprisoned. If he expects Watson to stand up and speak for him, he is undoubtedly expecting the sun to rise from the west. Capitalists only have interests in their eyes, and their promises are not at all. Can't believe a word of it. As long as Shaun is blinded by temporary benefits and betrays Osborn, Watson and Company, which has obtained the new drug formula, will definitely turn its back and show no mercy. For these pharmaceutical companies, scientists who do not have a certain say are just making money in their eyes. The only value of a machine is its energy to continuously extract profits. That's why Shaun chose Harry as a partner. Umbrella relied on Osborn Industries to slowly spend its new life and grow rapidly with the help of the other party's energy. At least he doesn't have to worry about Harry being like those greedy and selfish capital tycoons who are always planning to expel him out of the game and enjoy the rich cake to himself. Good people in this world are rewarded with good things. Shaun exhaled. Ever since he defeated the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen and obtained the huge energy from the remains of the dragon bones, he seemed to have entered a new world. From controlling the energy in his body to driving it with his thoughts and condensing it into substance, he felt that he was making progress every day. The cells in his body became hungrier, absorbing solar radiation and other energy at an increasing rate. Accelerate. Shaun clenched his fist slightly, feeling the power of the Sentinel in this body, awakening and reviving bit by bit. Watson and Company, the pharmaceutical company that caused big trouble for mutants. Shaun finally remembered the name Watson. In the original timeline, the leader of this company was particularly hostile to this special group that suffered from discrimination because his son was a mutant, and finally developed a method to suppress mutants. Genetic medicine. Even if someone as powerful as Magneto is shot by a weapon loaded with this medicine, he will lose his ability for a period of time and become an ordinary person. Maybe I don't have to do it myself. Shaun's eyes flickered. He felt the hazy white light in his mind and his increasingly strong spiritual will. Maybe I should find time to visit the great Professor Charles. At 2 o'clock in the morning, New York, shrouded in heavy night, was as quiet as a baby sleeping in a cradle. Located in Umbrella on the outskirts of Long Island, the spire-like main experimental building is still brightly lit even at a time when it should have been asleep. Perhaps because the salary is higher than that in the same industry, hardworking researchers have no objection to working overtime. The boss who has achieved great achievements at a young age has always been generous enough. As long as you can show your value in a timely manner, then he will never be stingy with his efforts. At present, Umbrella's core projects are mainly cross-species inheritance led by Dr. Connors. Only the recently joined Dr. Zhao Hailun and a few people such as experimental assistant Gwen can really access the core. In terms of confidentiality measures, the laboratory is doing quite well inside. Researchers who have not entered the core level will only receive tasks assigned by their superiors from time to time, but have no idea of the exact purpose of doing so. They are like workers on an assembly line, completing detailed work such as splitting and packaging of products, but knew nothing about the real experimental project. Although Umbrella is still in its infancy, the salary is considerable, but the competitive pressure is also very huge. Shaun has formulated a strict resource allocation system and conducts scientific research assessments every 3 months. Except for Dr. Connors, in addition to the research team you lead, other groups must undergo strict review to determine the next funding and resource allocation based on the tasks they have completed and the progress of the project. In Shaun's words, this allows Umbrella to remain competitive at all times. According to the catfish effect, blindly being comfortable with the current life will soon be eliminated due to stagnation, especially for the rapid changes. A rapidly changing field of science. If you want to keep the sardines alive, you must put in an active catfish. While Shaun improves the welfare benefits of researchers, he also sets up a strictly enforced competition mechanism, so that those with outstanding abilities can unleash their potential, and can eliminate the mediocre people who cannot bear the pressure and are not suitable for this job. Connors walked through the bright lobby of the main building, took the elevator all the way, and took his assistant Gwen into the core area of the laboratory. After passing fingerprint and iris authentication, he entered the control center on the underground floor. This is the central control area used to house supercomputers. Only Shaun and Dr. Connors are qualified to enter and exit. The rest must apply to them if they want to enter. As an element of high-tech development, supercomputers are called accelerators of scientific research. These large-scale computers are composed of hundreds, thousands or even more processors and can calculate complex tasks that ordinary PCs and servers cannot complete. Computers themselves have strong capabilities of calculating and processing data. If the computing speed of an ordinary computer is compared to the walking speed of a human, then a supercomputer will reach the speed of a rocket. Under the premise of such computing speed, people can predict and explain natural phenomena that were previously impossible to experiment through numerical simulation. Shaun, why did you call me here so late? Have you already obtained the latest model of supercomputer? Connors strode into the brightly lit computer room, followed by Gwen behind him. The recent victory over cross-species inheritance has reached a critical stage. This one-armed middle-aged man almost forgets to sleep and eat, and is buried in the laboratory day and night. But I asked those manufacturers and their orders have been scheduled for half a year. It is impossible to get them so quickly. Before that, we can only rent them from other institutions. Connors immediately denied his inference. He had contacted the technology company that built the supercomputer a long time ago, but almost all of the orders were booked by the energy department and private laboratories, and it was impossible to get them in a short time. Do you remember what I told you before, Doctor? Shaun stood tall with a confident smile on his face. Connors frowned. He remembered that he vaguely mentioned supercomputers to Shaun before. After all, as an emerging laboratory, the high-tech fields involved in the future will require powerful computing and data simulation capabilities. So having a private supercomputer is an imperative requirement. Frequently renting computing resources from other institutions is not only troublesome, but also very difficult to keep the experimental project itself confidential, especially for a private laboratory like Umbrella that is not affiliated with a national department. Don't worry, I will give you the best supercomputer on the planet. That's what Shaun told himself at the time. Connors looked at the confident Shaun. Did Shaun get the latest model of supercomputer through Osborne's door? Shaun smiled and inserted a black disk into the control center. There was a slight buzzing sound, as if some kind of machine had been activated. The huge screen installed on the wall suddenly lit up, and endless data was like a waterfall. It kept refreshing, leaving Connors and Gwen stunned. Connors looked at the vast computer room that was starting to operate, and couldn't help but have a hint of doubt in his heart. So far, the best supercomputer in the United States is the Titan, located at the Department of Energy's Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which operates at a speed of 17.59 petaflops per second. Of course, if you add Tony Stark, who has made outstanding achievements in the field of artificial intelligence, then Titan may have to step down from the top spot. After all, his intelligent butler Jarvis has incredibly powerful computing power. Could it be that in this short period of time, Shaun created an artificial intelligence comparable to Jarvis? Even though Connors had extraordinary confidence in this talented young man, he felt that this was simply impossible. Don't be shy, Red Queen, come out and say hello to Dr. Connors and Miss Stacy. As Shaun's voice fell, the empty and monotonous space suddenly changed. The dim light swayed. In the blink of an eye, the spacious machine room located underground turned into a luxurious villa on the coast. Elegant and luxurious interior decorations were hung on the walls. The famous oil paintings on the floor, the soft carpets under your feet, and even the flowers in the bottles are all so real and lifelike. Dr. Connors' eyes were dull. He carefully observed the surroundings and found no trace of falsehood. Even the smallest details were handled perfectly. The blowing of the airflow and the simulation of the scenery were completely enough to deceive the human senses. Is this all true? Gwen lowered her head and sniffed lightly. She could clearly smell the fragrance of flowers. Through the huge transparent floor-to-ceiling windows, waves crashed. Where the water and the sky met, a few seagulls flew across the sea, and the beautiful scenery of nature came into view. The sight made people completely forget that a second ago, they were still in the machine room in the underground space. This is just a simulation of data. Other supercomputers can do it, but I can do it more accurately and nuancedly than them. A soft child's voice suddenly sounded, and Gwen was startled to find a little girl wearing a red princess dress looking at her. "Hello, Miss Gwen Stacy, I am the Red Queen." The girl's eyes were cold, but her voice was full of childishness. Gwen covered her mouth in surprise. This little girl called the Red Queen looked like a real person, as delicate and beautiful as a doll. She couldn't help but stretched out her hand to touch. A wave of light swayed, and her fingertips passed directly through the simulated image. "Miss Gwen Stacy, please maintain respect for me." The little girl actually showed a rather anthropomorphic dissatisfaction. Her little mouth was slightly pursed, and she didn't look like a cold machine at all. The red princess dress floated like water waves, swaying slightly, and the lifelike image of the Red Queen suddenly dissipated, collapsing like a feather of light, only to regroup after a few seconds. "I'm sorry." Sensing her rudeness, Gwen quickly retracted her finger, but her big eyes still looked at the Red Queen from time to time. She still couldn't believe that the little girl in front of her, who was as delicate as a doll, was actually an avatar of artificial intelligence. Connors on the side was extremely excited, but his performance was relatively calm, not as obvious as Gwen. Compared with other national departments or the supercomputers built by private laboratories that cost huge sums of money, they are huge and bulky, and are undoubtedly the Red Queen is even better. Not only does she have a higher level of intelligence, but she also has a simulated personality that is similar to a living body. She does not just follow instructions mechanically, but is able to make simple rehearsals and judgments on her own. Moreover, both the computing speed and data deduction are far beyond the level of large computers, especially for the construction of real environments, which cannot be separated from huge computing capabilities. To simulate a realistic real world, accurate data is needed for deduction. Forecasting. Even the world's top supercomputers can only simulate simple changes in events to predict rough and fuzzy directions. Connors looked at the smiling young man and couldn't help feeling that Shaun could always bring incredible surprises to people. He admired the avatar of the little girl Red Queen, and did not ask where Shaun got such incredible artificial intelligence. This one-armed middle-aged man was not a pedantic person who was ignorant of the world. He had known Shaun for so long, so naturally you can also detect some unknown secrets hidden in the other person. For example, Mr. Wesley, who secretly provided funds for his laboratory, Connors had vaguely heard rumors about. The upstart tycoon from Hell's Kitchen was said to have killed such a terrifying figure as the former underworld emperor Kingpin. Yet he was so respectful to a young student, which seemed unbelievable. There are other details that prove that this young man who is called a genius by the outside world actually has an unknown side, but Connors is not willing to delve into Shaun's true face. He was once just a down and out, a disabled scientist who hides in a university to teach and conduct experiments with funding from Osborn. The mainstream scientific community has almost forgotten him. At most, he will be used as a laughingstock when talking and laughing. What changed Connors' life and destiny was the young man in front of him. He came up with the decay rate algorithm, which made the stagnant cross-species genetics only one step away from success. He invented ALZ-112, and with Osborn the industry has reached cooperation, and it is entirely thanks to Shaun's help that he has achieved his current status and honor. Therefore, no matter what purpose Shaun has, or the other party has another appalling identity in private, he only needs to stand firmly behind the other party and do his best to help. This is Connors' way of repaying. Originally, Connors was not a perfect person with high moral standards, which was one of the reasons why Shaun chose him in the first place. People with too high moral bottom line are destined to part ways with him and go to the opposite side. Therefore, he did not have very eager thoughts on wooing Reed Richards, the future Mr. Fantastic. On the contrary, it was Dr. Otto, a scientist with blurred moral boundaries, who aroused his interest more. "Doctor, are you satisfied?" Shaun asked with a smile. "There is nothing better than her." Connors nodded, with uncontrollable excitement in his voice. "This is simply not something a supercomputer can do, she is a perfect creation." The little girl Red Queen bent her knees slightly and performed a medieval classical etiquette. A reserved smile broke out on her indifferent face, indicating that she was satisfied with Dr. Connors' praise. "Thank you for your compliment, Dr. Connors." The Red Queen smiled sweetly and said softly, "There are existences similar to me on this planet. I am not unique." A light flashed in Shaun's eyes. Tony Stark's Jarvis is also a very powerful artificial intelligence. It can transfer itself to any digital terminal independently. It can think independently and help its owner handle various matters, calculate various information. The development of Iron Man's armor and the update of the arc reactor are all inseparable from its assistance. After recording the voices and fingerprints of Connors and Gwen, they left the underground computer room. Shaun said that he still wanted to debug the Red Queen's data program, so he stayed alone. He snapped his fingers, and the Red Queen's virtual image flickered, then disintegrated and dissipated. The empty and monotonous underground computer room suddenly turned into a room filled with soft white light, as if there was a huge space that extended endlessly. "I don't understand why you want me to hide my existence." An indifferent voice sounded. Compared with the Red Queen's anthropomorphic emotions, this voice was more like a cold machine. "Umbrella needs an intelligent housekeeper who can monitor every move within the laboratory, be responsible for processing recurring huge data calculations, and speed up the progress of experimental projects." Shaun paused for a moment, standing in the infinite white space, with a calm voice, "And I need a pair of God's eyes overlooking this planet. It can provide me with useful intelligence and collect all information. SHIELD, Hydra, and even Stark Industries, those strict and complex firewalls are useless to you. You are the god in the computer, and the endless network is your territory." A retro black and white TV appeared out of thin air, with dense snow-white dots flashing. Amidst the sizzling noise, a cold voice came out, "So you don't want others to know my existence?" "At least I don't think about it yet. When I can stand in front of the stage without any scruples, then the whole world will know that there is a pair of eyes that are always looking down on all living beings on this planet." Shaun smiled slightly. As his thoughts changed, the white space was like a huge painting spread out. The sky was full of stars rising and setting, the sun and the moon rotated alternately, endless galaxies hung above his head, and the blue planet appeared under his feet. He liked the center of the universe. It stands on the top of the Milky Way, overlooking the ups and downs of billions of stars. "I spent all my points to redeem you, don't let me down." The system points obtained from the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen are now empty. "Skynet." Shaun whispered its name. "I will be your Eye of Horus, the great creator." The cold sound seemed to come from high in the sky, and the invisible electronic signal centered on Umbrella and spread rapidly outward, like an invisible ghost, turning the network with footprints all over the world into his own brain and body. In the cold and dark outer space, with satellites flying along the orbit, the data center suddenly experienced chaos and delays for a few seconds, but quickly returned to normal and continued its daily work. They are like the cold pupils of gods, looking down at the huge planet that emits blue light. On the front line of Afghanistan, a jeep convoy raised billowing smoke. Tony, who had just finished promoting the latest product from Boglan Air Force Base, sat in the back with a glass of whiskey on the rocks. Passionate rock music reverberated in the carriage, sitting with him. The young soldiers in the back row looked at this legendary figure with curiosity from time to time. "Why do I feel like you are taking me to a military court?" Tony, wearing sunglasses, showed off his sense of humor as always. "That's not okay. What bad thing have I done? I feel like you're going to knock me down when the car stops next." "Why, don't the commanders of the army allow you to speak?" "Can talk, sir," the young soldier replied shyly. The silent atmosphere in the car was broken when Tony Stark opened his mouth. The soldiers in the car with him were no longer as restrained as before. "This playboy has such charm and can always change dull situations. Be happy or embarrassed." "Sir, I have a question." The soldier sitting in the front row turned his head, with a look of gossip on his seemingly upright face. "I heard that you slept with every cover girl of Maxim magazine last year." Quote. When the topic of interest was discussed, Tony took off his sunglasses and said calmly, "That's a good question. You're partly right. I don't have a schedule for the cover girl in March, but luckily it's twins in December." "What else do you want to ask?" Tony, who looked cool and uninhibited, turned his head. "Are you kidding me? This is not a primary school class, so why raise your hand?" "Can I take a photo with you?" the shy young soldier asked in a low voice. "Of course." Tony leaned close to his little fan and continued to use his sense of humor, "But don't post it on the blog. Please, why are you making a gangster gesture? I'm just making a joke. Get up." "Peace, I love peace the most," he said nonchalantly. Boom! There was a loud noise, violent fire broke out, and turbulent shock waves stirred up air waves. A jeep driving in the front was hit by artillery, and its solid body instantly turned into scrap iron wreckage. The convoy came to a sudden stop, and Tony tried his best to maintain his composure. As the best arms supplier in the United States, he had encountered many dangerous things without panicking and shouting like ordinary people. The left side was attacked. Fierce firefights came from the communication channel. The soldiers in the car rushed out one after another, but before they could find any trace of the enemy, violent bullets poured in like a torrential rain. "Jimmy, stay and protect Mr. Stark." The young soldier pulled Tony down and lay down in the carriage to prevent him from being accidentally injured by stray bullets. Before the young soldier who rushed out of the car had a chance to fire, a burst of dense fire broke out. The living person who had just been chatting and laughing with Tony immediately fell down, and the cold bullets took away everything from him in an instant. The bulletproof door glass was riddled with holes, like a hornet's nest. Tony listened to the fierce exchange of fire outside. The enemy's firepower was extremely powerful, completely suppressing the soldiers on his side. He thought for a few seconds and reached out to push the door open. He could no longer sit still and wait for death. At this time, Tony couldn't help but regret. He had known that he should have gone back with Rhodes. All the main troops of the Air Force Base were over there. Dodging the roaring artillery fire and stray bullets flying everywhere on the battlefield, Tony leaned behind a huge rock and took out his cell phone to send a distress signal. His mobile phone is connected to Jarvis's data terminal. When the reliable smart butler receives the information, he will immediately locate his location and then tell Obadiah and Pepper. As the helmsman of an arms giant, Tony's growing-up environment was not always smooth sailing. Kidnapping threats from Stark Industries competitors, secret assassinations from other interest groups, and even sudden attacks by terrorists from other countries, these dangerous experiences made him in this critical moment, he was still able to remain calm and calmly rescue himself. The distress signal was sent out, and with a boom, a grenade flew from the sky and landed in the soil not far away. Tony looked at the conspicuous, made by Stark Industries, on the weapon, and his brain briefly lost his ability to think. And then the blast of air blew him away. In the thick and pungent smell of gunpowder smoke, Stark fell heavily to the ground and barely opened his eyes, with blood stains on his chest fainting. He tore off his shirt, and shrapnel was inserted into the body armor he was wearing. Tony felt a sharp pain in his chest, and his head felt as if it had been hit by a sledgehammer, and he was extremely dazed. Not long after, his consciousness fell into darkness, and this world-renowned arms dealer passed out on the battlefield filled with artillery fire. Manhattan, New York. Tony Stark was attacked. Shaun didn't seem surprised. His butterfly, which traveled through time and space, did not bring much change to the world. The future Iron Man is still moving forward according to the trajectory of history. You gave me a list of people who need special attention, and Tony Stark was among them. He sent a distress signal on the front line in Afghanistan a minute ago, and I intercepted it. A cold voice sounded in the headset. Compared with another independent thread trumpet, Skynet is more like an indifferent and rational mechanical life. It followed Shaun's instructions and loaded the Red Queen with a virtual personality, just like creating life, injecting he acquired a complete character and thinking ability to manage Umbrella on his behalf. Let Tony stay in the cave for a while. After all, this is a rare spiritual journey. Shaun chuckled. He didn't want the Playboy to be rescued so early. Moreover, the distress signal was actually sent to Obadiah Stane. Tony obviously did not realize who leaked his route. Otherwise, how could the armed men accurately know the departure time and location of the convoy based on those militants alone? They even possess sophisticated and powerful weapons, all manufactured by Stark Industries, which are enough to annihilate regular American troops. Those who have access to this confidential information are undoubtedly the people around Tony who trust him very much. If you think about who the ultimate beneficiary will be after he is killed, you can basically get the answer. If Obadiah gets the distress signal sent by Tony, I am afraid that the life of the Playboy who is staying in the cave making armor will not be saved. According to you, Tony Stark is a key figure in this world. Don't you intend to ensure his safety? Skynet asked doubtfully. I'm not their nanny, Shaun said calmly. Tony being alive is very helpful for me to still maintain my status as a prophet, but his death will not have much impact. This is not a set of dominoes. If one is toppled, they will all be destroyed. Iron Man is just an introduction to the future. There is no such thing as dominoes. Stark will still have someone else take his place. What I have to do is to ensure that the world moves forward in the direction I know well within a certain range. As for being like a nanny, I help those superheroes to make sure they grow up according to their original trajectory. I came to this world to gain a place and control my own voice. Under this goal, whether it is S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra, whether they are heroes or villains, they may be my enemies. Shaun's eyes flashed and his tone was indifferent. At this time, he was more like a cold mechanical intelligent life like Skynet. The world is structured in a pyramid. The higher you go, the narrower the road becomes. If you want to be the one who reaches the top, that person must pull down every competitor. Skynet, this world is like a huge hunting ground. If you don't want to become a prey, you must not only have sharp claws and ferocious beasts, but you must also hold a shotgun. The young man looked at the bustling and noisy city, with the cold light of a hunter flashing in his deep eyes, and 6 gems are the best weapons. Umbrella's private lounge. Shaun took out a bottle of Scotch whiskey from the dazzling wine cabinet, poured 2 glasses and placed them on the table. Harry pulled the tie around his neck and leaned on the sofa without restraint. The handsome face of Mr. Osborn, who inherited the family business at a young age, was full of depression and irritability. It was obvious that his visit to Umbrella today was not for official business such as business cooperation, but for a special visit. My friend expressed his distress. Why, are you having trouble with Mary Jane again? Shaun handed the wine glass to Harry without forgetting to tease him. Ever since Harry took charge of Osborn Industries, due to his busy work schedule, he couldn't spare any time to spend with his girlfriend. He often got into trouble with Mary Jane, and always used him and Gwen as the go-betweens. The young and rich Master Osborn drank the cold wine in one gulp, and a burning feeling spread down his throat. The stimulation of the alcohol made Harry's eyes red, and he couldn't help but blurt out some private words hidden deep in his heart. I have always regarded you as a friend, Shaun. Just like Peter, you are one of the few true friends I have. Harry became emotional and his voice gradually rose. Before I met you, I only had Peter as my good brother. We've known each other since we were very young. His father used to work for Osborn and he was my father's right-hand man. When Peter was in school, he was often bullied by bullies because of his introverted personality. I was not popular in the boarding school at that time. Maybe it was because the two of us were always alone, so we became very good friends after that, regardless of comics, or we always share snacks together. I thought this friendship would last forever. Hearing that Harry couldn't do anything without Peter, Shaun probably knew what was going on. The bloody love triangle between Spider-Man, the second-generation Green Goblin and Mary Jane was really speechless. If there were other questions, maybe he could clear up Harry's doubts, but in terms of emotions, Shaun himself didn't want to get involved too much. Erica was just a simple exchange of interests and intertwined desires, and the real emotional factors were very small. As for the innocent and kind-hearted Miss Stacy, he restrained himself in maintaining a distant and ambiguous attitude, and did not easily accept the other party's beautiful feelings. In the final analysis, Shaun Cypers, this upright and sunny young man, a humble and gentle genius scientist, is just a disguise that appears on the surface. Putting aside these false appearances, the cold and deep dark aura he exudes is enough to shock and frighten people. Just like shadows under the sun, people most of the time don't notice that the dazzling sun also casts dark shadows. Inexperienced first love is charming, but love that has stood the test is priceless. Shaun said a motto, and he patted Harry on the shoulder. You should let Mary Jane choose, before you between you and Peter. And now is not the time to indulge in personal affairs between children, especially you. Harry, you are the helmsman of the Osborn ship, managing a huge business empire. You are no longer a child protected by your parents. If you become a love saint, you can stabilize the crumbling Osborn. This industry can make Watson retract his exposed fangs, then you can be heartbroken and grieved for the lost love as much as you want, but now you are not qualified for this. There was a hint of sternness in Shaun's gentle voice. He handed Harry another glass of wine and continued. Emotions are not a necessity for human life, Harry. A failed relationship can make a man grow up quickly. Don't worry about it anymore. The entanglement between Mary Jane and Peter should not stop at this level. I understand everything you said, Shaun, but I can't solve any problem, whether it's Watsonton's eager gaze or the complicated feelings between Mary Jane and Peter. Harry looked up at the ceiling. In his heart, he actually admired Shaun quite a bit. He was not like him who had everything when he was born. This friend, from an unknown boy in New York to a genius today, rarely relied on outside help. Just like his father who started from scratch and founded Osborne Industries, he achieved enviable status and wealth solely through personal efforts and talent. You need to figure out the personal relationship issues yourself, but I have some ideas on how to deal with Watson. Shaun shook the glass, and the ice cubes collided with the wall of the glass, making a crisp sound. He looked at the drunken Harry and said softly, "Didn't you say before, General Thaddeus Ross, for Osborne? There is a lot of interest in human enhancement programs, and there are even plans to recreate the super soldier serum of the last century. I'm just interested. Human enhancement potion is a failed project. It has side effects that are difficult to eradicate. It can turn people into beasts, full of aggression and desire to kill. It is impossible for the military to accept such defective products." Harry leaned on the sofa. The tedious business affairs of the company and the complicated emotional problems had made this young Master Osborne mentally and physically exhausted. He once tried to be a man like his father, majestic, decisive and convincing. Manipulate the financial situation. But as soon as he pulled the precarious Osborne industry back from the edge of the cliff, he encountered the predator Watsonton. Coupled with the heavy emotional blow, the young Master Osborne couldn't help but feel discouraged. Feeling cold. Umbrella is willing to take over this failed project. The military is committed to the research of super soldiers and has never given up for a century. The emergence of Captain America hastened the end of World War II. He almost changed the war alone. That's why the generals are so crazy about super soldiers, they want an invincible super army. Shaun pressed Harry's shoulder. His deep eyes revealed an astonishing light. Like a blazing fire, Osborne gave Umbrella all the information about the human enhancement plan. Maybe I can complete this failed project. In this way, we will have a bargaining chip with General Ross, and Watson will not be afraid. But, taking in too much alcohol made Harry's head dizzy. He was a little hesitant about his friend's plan. Osborne almost went bankrupt because of this project. Even though my father invested a lot of money and manpower, it still only produced defective products. It failed to give birth to another Captain America, but instead led to the emergence of the Green Goblin. We should not restart this project. Everything has two sides, just like the human enhancement program, which can not only breed terrible criminals like the Green Goblin, but also create war heroes like Captain America. As a monopoly giant in the pharmaceutical industry, Watsonton, Osborne, if you want to promote ALZ-112 to the market, it is a powerful opponent that you cannot avoid, unless you are willing to give up most of your interests, succumb to Watsonton's will, and add Osborne to its vast territory. Quote, "Each industry can only have one predator at the top of the food chain. Do you want to kneel at Watson's feet?" Shaun stared at Harry closely, his sword-like eyes making the young president dodge. At this time, Shaun completely lost his usual sunny and gentle temperament. Instead, he exuded a deep and cold dark aura, which made people feel fearful. Of course not, Osborne never succumbs to others. The strange feeling disappeared in a flash. Looking at the vague sarcastic smile on Shaun's lips, Harry was inspired to fight and said firmly. Shaun received the answer and nodded with satisfaction. "Then let us knock Watson off the throne of the industry giant." Army Officers Club, Washington, D.C. Shaun, wearing a black suit, stepped inside, holding a dark black box in his hand. The guests he invited were sitting on high rotating seats, sipping sweet rum. Their straight and pressed military uniforms were studded with shining gold stars, showing how distinguished the host was. "Keeping you waiting, General Ross." Shaun strode to the bar and asked the bartender to bring him a glass of whiskey. "I thought a brave soldier like you would like a strong drink like vodka." Ross, who was drinking by himself, laughed, then shook his head and said, "It was true when I was young. I liked strong liquor and beautiful women. But now I am no longer a strong young man. My personal doctor has always told me to avoid tobacco and alcohol, saying that this thing will allow me to meet God in advance." As he spoke, Ross took the top quality cigar ordered by the bartender, held it in his mouth, and blew out a puff of rich smoke. The gray-haired army general glanced at Shaun and said straight to the point, "You want me to wave the flag and cheer for Osborn? Young man, maybe the power of capital is driving the direction of this country, but not everyone can be bought with money, at least you and Osborn can't afford that price for the time being." Ross raised his head arrogantly, looking down in a condescending manner. Of course he had heard of Shaun, a genius who was famous in New York. This army general has seen many geniuses in his lifetime, such as Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark, the Philistine and treacherous arms dealer, and Hank Pym, a die-hard who does not understand current affairs. Ross is no longer surprised by creatures like genius. Human wisdom may be able to solve most of the world's problems, but it cannot lift a stone. The power of knowledge is not omnipotent and requires the support of money and capital. Of course I understand that money can't buy a general's friendship. Shaun smiled lightly and was not angry at General Ross's frankness. But I have something that the military is interested in. If I didn't have the leverage to impress the general, I wouldn't humiliate myself. Seeing Shaun's confident expression, Ross couldn't help but find it interesting that few young people could maintain a calm attitude that was neither humble nor arrogant in front of him. "What can you and little Osborn come up with? It's not easy to satisfy the appetite of an army general." The old man holding a cigar smiled disapprovingly. The conflict between Osborn Industries and Watsonton Company has been spread recently. Watsonton, which exists at the top of the industry, is like an inviolable lion. Any predator that dares to challenge its status will be attacked, torn to pieces by sharp claws. The industry is generally not optimistic about Osborn Industries, which has a shallow foundation. The new helmsman, Harry Osborn, has mediocre performance and few achievements. How can he be the opponent of an established enterprise like Watsonton? "Super soldier," Shaun said concisely. He carefully took out a potion from the deep black box he brought. The dark green liquid seemed to be flowing all the time, and under the light, it exuded some strange attraction. Ross's pupils shrank, and his casual attitude immediately changed. He put out the cigar with his right hand and said in a deep voice, "It is already known to everyone that Osborn failed in the human enhancement plan. Young people, don't let it happen for a moment. It's not fun to act impulsively and do something wrong that you regret, deceiving an important military official." The word super soldier has unimaginable appeal to the military. During World War II in the last century, Captain America Steve Rogers was a beneficiary of the rebirth plan. He led the Howling Commandos to defeat the German Nazi army, creating a chance for victory for the Allies. To this day, there are still detailed records of this legendary story in the Brooklyn Museum. Osborn's human augmentation plan did fail. It was only one step away from success, a determined and outstanding soldier. There was a slight arc at the corner of Shaun's mouth. He looked at General Ross and said sarcastically, "I have checked a lot of information. General, the super soldier serum created by Dr. Abraham Erskine was really perfect and had no flaws. As far as I know, Captain America was not the first super soldier. Before him, there was a man named John Schmidt who received the injection. Due to the side effects, the man who was the first to be injected with the super soldier serum became as terrifying as a skeleton, evil and murderous, and inhumane. The good guys got better and the bad guys got worse. It has nothing to do with the human enhancement potion that gave birth to the Green Goblin. No difference." Shaun knew the historical truth that was deliberately hidden by the military. In the eyes of Dr. Erskine, a super soldier did not have a strong body, but a brave and kind heart. That's why the thin little man Rogers, chosen, he proved to live up to Dr. Erskine's expectations. Injecting the super soldier serum will cause a person to endure unimaginable severe pain. The torture suffered by the body will be amplified at the same time as the negative emotions in the mind, like a ferocious beast released from the heart, devouring the positive personality of reason and kindness. The former leader of Hydra, the Red Skull, was the product of this situation, while Steve Rogers resisted the devouring of darkness in his heart. In other words, this great man known as Captain America himself was representing the beautiful spiritual side of mankind. His will is indestructible and unshakable. What you said is true. The super soldier serum that created Captain America was not perfect. It will be difficult for us to find another person like him." Ross sighed, with helplessness in his tone. an army composed of murderers, careerists, and lunatics is of no use to us. The military needs perfect super soldiers who are loyal, strong, and capable of fighting 1 against 100. A powerful force that affects the battlefield. Osborn failed to meet this point, so the human enhancement plan failed. The tall army general stood up. He thought that Shaun could give him some bargaining chips to impress him. He spent a long time talking about young people. If you want others to be your helpers, you must at least provide corresponding benefits. Defective human enhancement potions alone are far from enough. Osborn is willing to give 10 samples of the human enhancement potion, as well as all the research information. Seeing General Ross preparing to leave, Shaun's expression remained unchanged. He raised the cup and took a sip, then threw out the first bait. I heard that the general formed an independent scientific research team and found a genius in the field of physics. Dr. Bruce Banner, prepare to copy the super soldier serum. I think these things should be very useful to you. Smart young people know how to do what they like. A hint of admiration flashed in Ross's eyes. He sat back on the high-leg swivel seat and shook his head. It's not enough. This thing is not enough to make me risk irritation. The risk of a powerful medical group coming to cheer Osborn up. I don't need you to be Osborn's backer, General. As long as Osborn still holds the idea of transforming into the medical industry, then one of him and Watson must be eliminated. Shaun paused for a moment, and there was a hint of coldness in his deep eyes. I will package all the information and samples of Osborn's human enhancement plan to you, and General, as long as you let my new drug be successfully launched, the transaction will be over. How will you face Watson's counterattack in the future? Ross seemed to be interested and asked with great interest. That's a problem that Harry and I need to solve. Shaun still maintained a humble, gentle and polite image. He tapped his fingers on the bar table and whispered, don't always tie me to Osborn. General, let me introduce myself formally. Shaun Cypers, the founder of Umbrella Labs. I believe there will be opportunities for us to cooperate in the future. After walking out of the Army Officers Club, Shaun opened the car door and got into a black Lincoln that had been parked for a long time. After waiting for more than an hour, Harry kept yawning, looking bored and sleepy. You're finally out. I might fall asleep if you wait any longer. Harry put his hand on his friend's shoulder. I really admire you for being able to chat with a serious old man for so long. Shaun smiled faintly and loosened his somewhat tight tie. The army general, who was as majestic as a lion, was not someone to be fooled easily. He had rich experience and sharp eyesight, and ordinary people would feel the same when talking to him. Trembling, Osborn wanted to negotiate with such a big shot on an equal footing, which was undoubtedly a fantasy. Only if enough benefits are given to satisfy General Ross's appetite, he will stand in front of Osborn and temporarily act as a towering tree to protect him from the wind and rain. As the leader of Osborn, I thought you would accompany me in. Shaun leaned on the seat, the driver started the car, and the scenery on both sides slowly receded. Harry covered his head with a headache and looked like he was still hungover. He smiled and said, you can handle this kind of thing. General Ross doesn't like to deal with rich men like me. He appreciates the new generation of New Yorkers more. Young genius. Shaun couldn't help laughing and shook his head slightly. Ever since Harry suffered a heavy emotional blow, he seemed to have lost his enthusiasm for work and returned to his original life of reveling in wealth and wealth. He seemed to be emulating Tony Stark, the trend of. Maybe he wanted to numb himself and relieve his inner pain in this way, but in Shaun's opinion, this really meant escaping reality. I heard that you haven't appeared in the company for a week, and you can't be seen on the board of directors. Even the secretary doesn't know your specific whereabouts. Shaun asked casually. Well, haha, let's continue talking about General Ross. Has he agreed to Osborn's request? Harry laughed awkwardly and abruptly changed the subject. During this period of time, Harry's life has indeed been a little ridiculous. Mary Jane, who was originally inclined to get back together, left angrily and disappointed after witnessing him dancing carnivally with many hot girls in his arms. It is estimated that the young Spider-Man will now he was comforting the goddess in his dream. Regarding the breakup and reunion between the three of them, Shaun said that it would be enough to quietly move a small bench and watch the crowd quietly. He has no reason to refuse. Shaun said calmly. He understood what General Ross wanted, so he could naturally give him what he wanted and hit the vital point. Osborn has invested billions of dollars in the human enhancement plan. The general packed it up and took it away without spending a penny, and all he had to pay was to successfully launch Umbrella's new drug. As for whether Osborn would be rafted by Watson Company's thunder in the future, that had nothing to do with him. Relation. Who wouldn't like to do a business where you can make profits with just a few clicks? Harry couldn't help but yawn as he listened to his friend's explanation. There were thick dark circles between his eyes. He looked like he hadn't had a good rest. In fact, it was because Master Osborn had been partying too hard these past few nights, so he was in high spirits. Not good, the whole person looks quite depressed. Shaun no longer paid attention to the indulgent Harry, crossed his hands and rubbed them, looking through the glass car window, admiring the architectural style of Washington, D.C. As the capital of the United States of America, it is not as bustling and lively as New York, with densely populated high-rise buildings. Full of the glittering glory of an international metropolis, reveals a rare historical and humanistic atmosphere. There are numerous museums and historical and cultural relics here, such as the famous Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial, as well as many free and open museums, most of which display old items from the Second World War. The most famous of which is the Captain America Museum and Memorial Hall, which is the first choice for many schools to organize activities. Through the car window, the classical-style buildings all the way back, looking at the vivid and real world outside, Shaun closed his eyes, and the soft white light in his mind flickered slightly. The world moves forward slowly according to its original trajectory, just like the rumbling wheels of history, which will not deviate from the direction due to minor changes. Tony Stark is building a simple and rough steel armor in a cave in Afghanistan, and Bruce Banner is still a famous physics genius and has not turned into the angry Hulk at that moment. S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra are still hiding behind the scenes. No one knows the traces of the 6 gems. Far away in the galaxy, the overlord of the universe who has destroyed countless civilizations has not yet set his sights on this blue planet. Humanity lies quietly in the cradle, waiting for the super. A new era has come when heroes are born. What Shaun has to do is to slowly accumulate strength before the advent of that new era, and hold good cards in his hands until he has enough power to stand at the top of the pyramid without being driven by anyone, and take control to become the final winner. The young man had a smile on his face. Excellent hunters often have great patience. After conquering Hell's Kitchen, whose turn will be next? Stark Industries. Pepper stepped on black high-heeled shoes and stormed into the office of the company's top CEO. Obadiah Stine, who was sitting in the chair, seemed a little shocked. You must know that as Tony's personal secretary, Miss Potts, known as Pepper, but he always looks dignified and generous, and rarely panics like this. What trouble did Tony cause again? No, he should have returned to New York from Afghanistan by this time. Obadiah chuckled, his seemingly kind eyes inadvertently revealed a sinister light. Tony is missing, Pepper replied incoherently. The latest news just received from Afghanistan. Tony's convoy was attacked by local militants and was almost wiped out. Colonel Rhodes did not find Tony's body at the scene, but his mobile phone positioning showed no response. Ja Weiss couldn't determine the location either. Obadiah, who serves as the top CEO of Stark Industries, opened his mouth wide when he heard the news, showing an expression of disbelief and surprise, with a trace of anxiety and panic on his face. After he calmed down, he comforted the anxious secretary. Those terrorists will not do anything to Tony. They may be for money, or they want the high-tech weapons manufactured by Stark. In short, Tony himself is of immeasurable value. He has the most genius brain in the world. I will contact the Ministry of National Defense and ask them to continue to search for Tony's whereabouts. Stark Industries will also mobilize its own forces. We have many friends in Afghanistan and they will be willing to help. The bald CEO said a few more words of comfort, and then sent Pepper out the door after her mood had regained her composure. Watching the secretary's tall back go away, the smile on Obadiah's face gradually faded. Goodbye, Tony, he said calmly. Everyone says that Stark Industries has gone through 2 great eras. It first grew in the hands of Howard, and then was brought to the peak of glory by Tony. Everyone feels that this is the credit of Stark and his sons. As for Obadiah, who cares about an unknown guy standing behind the scenes? Few people would have noticed that after Howard died in an accident, it was him who stabilized the crumbling Stark Industries, and it was he who handed this behemoth that stood in the military industry into Tony's hands, and he worked hard and uncomplainingly for that flower. The young master manages the company. But in the end, he got nothing. All the glory and flowers belonged to Tony. Sometimes Obadiah felt like a clown on the stage, working hard for a long time, but in the end he only received a mocking laugh. Sorry, Tony, I will hold a grand funeral for you. The bald CEO sat back and looked down at his feet with contentment through the huge floor-to-ceiling windows. Stark Industries should probably change its name. The hot summer flies away like a lingering hot girl, twisting her slender waist, and the cool autumn arrives quietly through the withered yellow leaves. Shaun was standing in the Hand's new stronghold, the Star Circle building in the center of Hell's Kitchen. Erica, wearing a red and black tights, slowly walked out of the cubicle, holding two iron rulers in her hands. Exotic weapons. There were two flushes on the indifferent cheeks, as if he had just participated in some strenuous exercise. The steady steps were slightly soft, and the dark eyes were filled with water like spring tide. Although it is the basic character of a gentleman to be patient and wait for the lady, you took too long to change clothes. Shaun said with a chuckle, and he returned to Hell's Kitchen, a place filled with chaos and sin. The area has now completely become the territory of the Hand and Wesley. The fierce and savage Russians, the numerous Irish gangs, and the powerful Mexican drug cartel groups. These were hunters who were once at the top of the food chain. They regarded each block as their own territory and did not tolerate the covetousness and infringement of outsiders. But everything became completely different after Kingpin died. At the beginning, they divided up the underworld emperor's illegal business and many territories. For the ownership of a block, the gangs at the bottom could fight to the death. And those businesses full of huge profits almost caused a wave of bloodshed, if not for it. Worried about Wesley, who had taken down the Kingpin, and the Hand, who were eyeing him, these gang leaders had already started killing each other. When these happy days of enjoying rich cakes passed, the insidious guy James Wesley no longer concealed his ambitions and formed an alliance with the new leader of the Hand. He vowed to drive away the gangs in Hell's Kitchen unless they were like dogs. Just be loyal, otherwise you won't be able to continue the good old days of being domineering. Of course, some people would jump out to resist at first. When they surrendered to Kingpin, the underworld emperor had never made such a stringent request. He actually wanted to hand over the territory and business of Hell's Kitchen to Wesley and the Hand. To distribute, doesn't this mean giving the banknotes in your own pocket to others for safekeeping? The Mexican criminal group that made its fortune through drug trafficking first raised objections. As the leaders, the Coven brothers led hundreds of heavily armed and vicious thugs with heavy firepower and rushed into Hell's Kitchen, preparing to give Wesley a beautiful blow. A show of force. The powerful firepower of this group of people was almost able to level the New York Police Department, but after they entered Hell's Kitchen, they never came out again. A lot of cement blocks were added to the construction site near the port of Hudson. Later, under the manipulation of Wesley, the Russians, who were always regarded as barbaric and brainless, became the first force to surrender. In return, they took away all the business of the Mexicans. A bloody lesson was laid before them, and the others, the gangster forces, finally succumbed to their powerful strength, surrendered all their territories and businesses, and obeyed Wesley's command. Do you know how difficult it is for me to get out of bed? Erica rolled her eyes at Shaun, and a charming charm arose spontaneously. When someone was asking for it like a beast, why didn't I complain? Shaun coughed twice and put on a special black mask. He felt that he should find an opportunity to create his own exclusive equipment, just like that guy Stark. Wesley asked me to thank you. Without the help of the Hand, he would not have been able to control the entire Hell's Kitchen so quickly. After putting on the mask, his voice was processed to become hoarse and thick. A fair deal, you let me be the sole leader of the Hand, and I help you control the underground world of New York. It's a win-win situation. Erica approached gracefully, looking up at Shaun slightly. The more I get, I sink deeper and deeper into this dark abyss, feeling happiness that I have never had before and indulging my inner desires. The closer I get to you, the closer I go to the darkness. Shaun put his arm around Erica's soft waist, and the two of them looked at Hell's Kitchen in the night. His hoarse voice slowly said, "You have experienced the deepest darkness and woke up from death. How can you? Do you still want to go back to your previous life of restraint? Erica, you and I are the masters behind this area. When facing us, those arrogant gang bosses have to grovel and bow their heads to apologize, while the police chief and prosecutor, who represent justice, talk and laugh with us and have a warm attitude. We rule this area with money and violence, and then expand and radiate outward, trampling the entire city under our feet. Shaun lowered his head and looked deeply at the brunette who was as docile as a cat. The dark aura rippled like water. The mayor may have the final say in New York during the day, but at night we are its masters. Forget the hesitation in your heart, abandon the confusion in your heart, and face yourself, Erica. The reason why you changed is not because of the influence of the black sky in your body, but because you are like this. Shaun lifted the girl's chin and swiped his fingers across the other's soft red lips. Erica, who was in a daze, seemed to understand something, and gently stuck out her tongue, licking the man's fingertips like a cat. Numbing currents suddenly coursed through his body, and Shaun nodded with satisfaction. The vast energy in his body came from the light of stars during the day, but once night came, this powerful force began to boil, like another personality that fell into darkness awakening. At this time, he is no longer an upright young man who needs to abide by social rules and moral laws. He can thoroughly enjoy the silence and fanaticism in the darkness, as if he is in the sea of ice and fire, with rational and crazy emotions coexisting. Erica leaned against the man's strong body, feeling the dark aura surrounding her, and said faintly, "It's so charming." Shaun exhaled a breath of empty air and suppressed the surging power in his body. He couldn't wait to meet the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. Irish gangsters, Mexican drug cartels. I said that I would clear out all those gangsters who do not abide by the rules. They have fallen at my feet. Who is next? Of course it's those annoying street heroes. The cruelty and darkness of the world lies in its reality, and it's time for these people to accept the truth. Hell's Kitchen has never been their place. Shaun asked and answered himself, and as he muttered, the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, with Daredevil at the head, the Punisher in the center, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, and the waving Danny Rand of fists. The 5 people were like sharp swords, carrying a sharp edge, and rushed into the new headquarters of the Hand Association, rushing all the way to the top of the building. They may represent the last ray of light in Hell's Kitchen, and they are just heroes who fight against the darkness. The final ending is not like the story, where they return full of glory and flowers. They often fall into the endless abyss, and no longer see the slightest hope. The Punisher rushed into the room first, the Browning pistol roared loudly, the black hole of muzzle flash bloomed, the huge floor-to-ceiling window was shot through by bullets, and glass fragments were scattered on the floor. The high-end wine cabinet standing next to the wall was also affected. It was blown to pieces by the continuous gunfire of bang bang bang. The high-end foreign wine placed in the cabinet exploded into pieces, and liquors of different colors flowed freely. Scotland whiskey, tequila, vodka and champagne, famous wines from all over the world are mixed together, and the air is immediately filled with a strong and intoxicating smell. The bullet is like a sharp cutting knife, tearing apart any obstacle in front of him. The Punisher is well aware of the terrifying opponent this time. The man whose origins are still unclear is not like the gang leaders and thugs he has dealt with in the past. The black-hearted businessman, the other party hid behind the scenes, quietly got rid of several leaders of the Hand, and with a wave of his hand expelled the gang forces that disobeyed him, turning Hell's Kitchen into a personal hunting ground. This man who calls himself King is more like an arbitrary tyrant than the former underworld Emperor Kingpin. Anyone who is unwilling to succumb to his will be swept away. This terrifying figure is enough to plunge Hell's Kitchen into darkness once again. The Punisher threw away the Browning pistol with an empty magazine. The reason why he rushed into the room with all firepower was to seize the opportunity. The gap between him and his opponent was too wide to allow the opponent to seize a chance. The moment the gunfire stopped, a black shadow emerged from the shadows. The Punisher seemed not surprised. He had expected it. He held the M16 automatic rifle on his back with his backhand and adjusted it to full automatic shooting mode. Along the long tongue of fire suddenly spit out, like the hot breath of a fire dragon, and spat out towards the rapidly rushing black shadow. What surprised the Punisher was that the opponent did not dodge or dodge, and went straight towards the metal bullet carrying strong kinetic energy. The pale golden light covered the whole body like running water, which was enough to cut the human body and tear apart the flesh and blood. The fierce firepower and speed suddenly slowed down, as if stuck in stagnant glue. Even with the naked eyes of the Punisher, he can actually see the clear trajectory of the air tearing apart, as if an invisible force slows down time. Of course this is just his illusion, in fact it is not that time gradually stops, but it is shot out. The bullet was blocked by an invisible barrier and gradually lost its momentum to move forward. Ding 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 ding. The metal bullet whose kinetic energy dissipated fell to the floor, making a crisp sound. The black shadow covered with a faint golden light had already rushed in front of the Punisher. The burly and strong body made a dull sound, as if it had been hit hard by a punch of sandbags. Severe pain swept through his body from his abdomen. Even though he was as strong-willed as the Punisher, he couldn't help but groan. He tried his best to raise his head, and the black shadow came into view, and the blurry image became clear. A tall figure with short black hair, his entire face was half covered by a tactical mask, only revealing a pair of deep eyes, like the King of Shadows. A cold laugh sounded like the cold wind of Siberia. The Punisher, who was as strong as a bear, was lifted up by the opponent with one hand, and was thrown out as a weapon, hitting Daredevil who was following closely behind. In less than 30 seconds, the number of street heroes in Hell's Kitchen has been reduced by 1. Who is next? Or should we all go together? Shaun asked calmly. For himself, who has already mastered superficial energy control, these people cannot pose any threat at all. Even metal bullets cannot hurt him now. With his own muscle density and recovery ability, ordinary firearms have no effect as long as he is not hit head-on by heavy fire weapons and blown to pieces. Give me back Erica, Daredevil said angrily, which is why he broke into the Hand headquarters again. He couldn't sit back and watch this terrible guy drag Erica into the dark abyss and sink into it. Mr. Lawyer, I am very touched by your affection, but it seems that Erica doesn't appreciate it. Shaun shook his head and smiled. The street heroes of Hell's Kitchen have lost their use value. They can neither create more points for themselves, nor are they a force that can be controlled. So this time, he won't be merciful. Daredevil wanted to say something more, but was interrupted by Shaun, who was stepping forward. A black shadow rushed in front of him like an arrow from a string, and a strong fist blast hit his face. You are recovering well from your injuries, Mr. Lawyer. The joking voice rang in his ears, and Daredevil swung out the short stick in his hand like a conditioned reflex. The solid weapon made of metal was held tightly by a strong arm, as if it was trapped in a copper wall, completely helpless. Shake the slightest bit. Seeing Daredevil in danger, Jessica and Luke Cage immediately launched a brave charge towards Shaun. The private female detective with strange strength directly tore down the door as if she was carrying a piece of paper, hit it hard and quickly. A team with no understanding. Shaun exerted force on his arm and broke Daredevil's arm with a click. Regardless of the other party's brutal roar, he lifted the Red Devil of Hell's Kitchen with one hand and faced the door panel that Jessica slammed down. Daredevil, who used his own body to bear a fierce attack for Shaun, was covered in scars, and his broken arm hung down weakly. Shaun kicked him out and hit the wall. Seeing his two teammates being hit hard one after another, Luke Cage struck like an angry bull. This big black man has an invulnerable body, and a body that is far beyond ordinary people. He wears the yellow jacket of a black rock singer in the 1980s, and his muscles are like hills. He looks like Schwarzenegger coming out of Terminator. Exudes an absolute tough guy vibe. I heard that you have a body of steel. A faint golden light condensed, and Shaun hit Luke Cage, who was running wildly, with a punch, as if it hit a hard steel plate. With a bang, the two were separated at the first touch. Shaun took a step back slightly. Luke Cage staggered. He shook his dazed head. He seemed to have hit an alloy wall head-on just now. The huge recoil force had made the body as hard as steel feel sore and numb. This is the first time for a black man to encounter such a situation. His muscle tissue and bone density have been strengthened, and he has super endurance and strength. He can penetrate a 4-inch thick steel plate with all his strength, but his opponent is not inferior to him. Not only is it powerful, but its defense and recovery capabilities are even more amazing. Shaun looked at Jessica and Iron Fist Danny Rand, who were joining the battle group one after another. His deep eyes were indifferent. He mobilized the surging power in his body and stepped forward. The floor under his feet could not bear the huge force. Dense cracks like a spider web opened, and then shattered. Luke Cage felt his vision go dark, and he was hit hard on the head, as if he was hit hard by a sledgehammer. Before he could resist, a red beam of light spurted out from Shaun's palm, like a sharp laser blade cut on the tough skin of the black man. Luke Cage, who had almost forgotten what pain felt like, stared angrily and roared like a wild beast. Blood spurted out from his chest. His dark skin was cut open by a red beam, leaving a deep bone-deep wound. Shocking. That's all. Shaun knocked away Luke Cage, who was moaning in pain, and looked at the clock on the wall. At this time, only 5 minutes had passed since the street hero burst into the room. Shaun looked coldly at Jessica and Danny Rand, who still had their combat strength intact, a powerful female private detective and a young guardian who had inherited the Kunlun heritage. In the original timeline, they both had he as a street hero famous in Hell's Kitchen, praised and admired by people, and a terrifying existence that makes criminals and gangsters fearful. I remember you. Your punch in the Chinese restaurant almost made me a prisoner of the Punisher. Shaun's voice was unusually calm. He glanced at Danny Rand, who was once the target of the hand. The iron fists on his face were guarded and serious, and an imperceptible golden light was flowing endlessly on a pair of fists. Speaking of which, mobilizing the energy in the body as a means of attack was the inspiration given to Shaun by the other party. After many attempts, he learned how to control the huge energy in the body and use it as a substantial beam to externally release, completing the preliminary energy manipulation. Jessica Jones, the fiery and sharp private detective of Hell's Kitchen. Shaun turned his head again and looked at Jessica, who was in a fighting posture. She had long black hair, a leather jacket and jeans, and her casual attire made her temperamental. The not-so-good female detective exudes a special decadent and classic temperament. I want to talk to you. The man wearing a black mask walked forward with a relaxed and gentle tone. It seemed that he was not the one who defeated the Punisher, Daredevil, and Luke Cage with a thunderous force just now, but it's like another person. The lawyer became my enemy because he firmly believed that it was me, the cunning villain who led Erica into the darkness, the brave Matt Murdock for love, the Daredevil of Hell's Kitchen. Naturally you have to defeat a villain like me and win back your first love. Shaun smiled and looked at Daredevil, whose arm was broken and fell to the ground. This blind lawyer with devout faith and a firm heart once believed in the justice of the law, and later devoted himself to the vigilante career of violently stopping crime. Wandering on the border between light and darkness, on the one hand, he longs for a normal life, but on the other hand, he cannot let go of the mask of a street hero. The Punisher stood against me because he didn't want Hell's Kitchen to be ruled by evil people like me. As for Luke Cage, Shaun looked down and saw the big black man with blood flowing freely on his chest. Struggling to get up. I'm sorry, it's better for you to lie down. He stepped heavily on the other person's chest, like a heavy mountain pressing down on him. The huge force made Luke Cage groan and fall weakly to the ground. This great hero of Harlem still holds the foolish idea that justice and evil are incompatible. In order to find the value and meaning of his existence, he teams up with a lovelorn blind lawyer and another violent man in an attempt to defend this area of justice. Seeing Luke Cage, who was about to suffocate, Shaun finally let go of his foot, and then kicked the opponent's head hard enough to turn someone into a bursting watermelon, but it just made the big black man faint. They all have their own inexplicable reasons, but why are you here? Shaun asked, spreading his hands. Mr. Rand, I solved the hand for you, and also played a guest role as a hero to save New York. And this private detective, have we had any unpleasant experiences? Faced with the man's questioning, Jessica couldn't help but remain slightly silent. She had no intention of getting involved in this turmoil, but Daredevil and the Punisher came to find her. As former teammates who had gone through life and death together and fought against the hand, she had no choice but to agree. This cold-tempered girl with a bad temper actually hates this kind of trouble. She just wants to run the private detective agency quietly and occasionally lend a helping hand to those in need. A part-time job like a street hero is actually not suitable for her. You ruled Hell's Kitchen with violent means, and now you are pretending to be innocent. The young and energetic Iron Fist sneered. Then do you know that the crime rate in Hell's Kitchen this month hit the lowest level of the year? It is no longer possible to see prostitutes and gangsters selling marijuana on the streets. No robbers dare to go out privately at night. Shop owners do not need to pay high fees. The protection fees they bear range, the conflicts between gangs gradually decrease, and the violence almost disappears. Guardian of Kunlun, can you tell me the reason for all this? Shaun stood tall, with the city's gorgeous lights and thick night behind him. The cold wind poured in from the cracked window, and an inexplicable chill hit Danny Rand's heart. Do you want to say that these changes in Hell's Kitchen are all because of you? He asked hesitantly. Of course, Shaun admitted frankly. He turned around and looked at the bustling city in the night, and said softly, it was me who restored order to this chaotic place. Like rats in the ditch, drug dealers roamed the streets and alleys. They now learn to abide by the rules and no longer use inferior goods to seduce young students. Various high-end places are where they do business, because standardized operations can bring more profits. The workplaces of prostitutes are hidden from the streets. The alleys have been transformed into entertainment clubs, nightclubs and bars. There are no young female students who are forced to sell their bodies, and there are no scoundrels who pull up their pants and leave, and they can also enjoy regularly scheduled physical examinations. You see, the original Hell's Kitchen was a hotbed of crime. People always lived a life of fear. But I transformed it. Those street gangsters put down their swords, guns and sticks, and instead entered the port terminals, private factories, and gangs. There is no longer a need for you to fight for territory and business. Everything about them is divided and decided by me. Drugs, smuggling, crime, these still happen, but everything is done according to the rules. Danny Rand expressed disbelief. He looked at Jessica next to him. The private detective nodded silently. She really felt that Hell's Kitchen had undergone tremendous changes recently. If you let a group of wolves eat grass, sooner or later they will resist, and then everything will go back to before, or even get worse. Iron Fist said coldly. Those who believe in violence will succumb to stronger forces. Shaun said indifferently. The ferocious wolves are unwilling to be obedient herbivores, so they will become food for lions. I have to say that compared to the strict moral rules of civilized society, this place is simpler and more straightforward. Either you obey my will, or you become an injustice at the bottom of the Hudson River. There are not many people in this world who are not afraid of death like you. The man raised a smile at the corner of his mouth, and his deep eyes flickered slightly. Okay, now it's time to make a choice. Do you want to stay in Hell's Kitchen and live quietly, enjoying the order and peace I bring, or go die? Shaun clapped his hands, as if he had finished a speech. Looking at the two people who never let down their guard, his gentle voice gradually became colder. At this moment, the deep darkness shrouding the entire city seemed to merge with him. Faced with Shaun's question, the room fell into dead silence. Danny Rand took a deep breath and looked at Jessica next to him. The moment their eyes met, his tense body suddenly exerted force, and he rushed to the powerful opponent in an instant, in front of him. The first one to rush forward was Iron Fist from Kunlun. This young man, who was born into a wealthy family since childhood, acquired an ancient inheritance and a pair of fists that were indestructible. When his spirit was particularly concentrated and he entered a special state of meditation, you can feel the chi in your body. Infusing this strange life energy into his hands can allow Danny Rand to break steel and resist bullets. However, this powerful trick cannot be used frequently. Every time he uses it, he will be exhausted for a period of time. It can only be released again after resting and adjusting. Especially for a novice Iron Fist like Danny Rand, he was unable to control the power in his body freely, leaving his combat power in an embarrassing state of high and low. But this time, the young and energetic Iron Fist obviously used all his strength, and the surging power was poured into the fist that was surrounded by golden light. There was a faint sound of thunder in the air, and a heavy punch had not yet hit Shaun's face. The sound of a strong tearing wind was already blowing towards my face, like a sharp blade, revealing a chilling and terrifying force. Isn't it good to be alive? The man didn't care at all. He chuckled and stretched out his hand. Boom! The collision sound like a giant bell resounded through the room, and invisible air waves spread out. Danny Rand, who was waving his fists, opened his eyes wide with an expression of disbelief. Since receiving the inheritance from Kunlun, he has never encountered such a situation. The power of the Iron Fist, which has always been unfavorable, was actually blocked by one hand. The fist covered in golden light hit Shaun's outstretched palm hard, like hitting a towering mountain, which could not be shaken at all. Danny Rand felt an invisible force field emanating from the opponent's body, weakening his own strength. Both the speed of punching and the ability to move were much slower than usual, as if he was stuck in a ball of sticky glue. The more he struggled to resist, the deeper he got stuck, making it difficult to get out for a while. Kunlun's immortal iron fist. Shaun raised a sneer at the corner of his mouth, knocked Danny Rand to the ground with a knee strike, and then quickly turned sideways to avoid Jessica's fierce offensive. A private female detective with strange powers came to attack him. Shaun raised his eyebrows. He was about to speak, but his expression suddenly changed. The invisible forces scattered around him rolled like angry waves, forming a real energy field, and he waved his fists. Jessica felt that the air was full of resistance. She seemed to have fallen into the deep sea, and all her actions were invisibly blocked by the sea water. In the slowly slowing movement, Shaun stepped lightly and turned sideways. Circles of ripples clearly appeared in the air. A metal bullet with a caliber of 7.65 millimeters was shot at his head. Even though the invisible force released was the energy slowed down greatly, but the bullet still passed by his forehead, and the muzzle of the gun exploded with a thunderous bang, making his eardrums buzz. Jessica's fist pump was just to cover up. In fact, her other hand was holding a small and lightweight Walter PPK pistol. This kind of firearm is favored by agents from many countries. It is compact and easy to carry concealed. It is often seen in many movies and fictional novels. It is also synonymous with Secret Agent 007 and James Bond. Click. Before the private female detective who was hiding a fatal blow could react, the pistol in her palm was crushed into scrap metal by Shaun. Her neck was tightly strangled by a powerful arm, gradually shrinking like an iron pincer, suffocating her. Pain hits the brain. Smart idea. This must be the Punisher's idea, right? Take advantage of the opportunity of close combat and find the right opportunity to shoot me in the head. Shaun breathed a sigh of relief. He was indeed not prepared for Jessica, who was always bare-handed. Will suddenly use firearms to plot. Jessica kicked her legs and gasped hard in her throat. Even in this dangerous situation, her eyes were still unruly. It seemed that nothing could make this woman who had fallen into darkness surrender. Although Shaun wanted to break the other person's neck, he still restrained the desire to kill in his heart, took a deep breath, and pressed Jessica against the wall, with an icy coldness flashing in his deep eyes. Jessica Jones, I'm not Kilgrave and I'll always show mercy to you. Your neighbor's name is Malcolm Ducasse. You have a friend who works in a radio station named Patricia Choi. West Walker, if you come to trouble me again, Jessica, you will live in endless regret for the rest of your life. The cold voice was like the freezing air in the extreme cold zone, which made Jessica feel a little chilly. This man wearing a mask was like the thickest darkness in the night, deeply covering her. This unruly and violent female private detective seems to have returned to the dark time when she was controlled by Kilgrave, that fool nicknamed Purple Man. The nightmare hidden in her heart, like the whisper of the devil, echoes again in ears. The arms that were tightly strangling her neck suddenly let go, and Jessica couldn't help but gasp for air. Her chin was forcibly pinched by the man, and she looked up at those bottomless cold eyes. It is said that I have to tame people like you. Such a fierce horse needs a whip, a hammer and a dagger. First, use the whip to beat the unruly wild horse. If it still refuses to yield, then hit it with a hammer. If it still cannot surrender, just stab it to death with a dagger. Cherish the last chance I give you, Jessica Jones. Shaun turned around indifferently, no longer looking at the female private detective who was kneeling on the ground. He picked up Danny Rand, who had regained his strength, and walked to the broken window. The cold wind roared in and stirred up Danny Rand's clothes. He was lifted in Shaun's hands like a chicken. There was no room for resistance and struggle. Feeling the biting chill coming from the man's body, the young man Iron Fist couldn't help but shudder. What do you want to do? Daredevil asked, barely holding himself up and leaning against the wall. Of course, to crush your naive ideas, with the blood of Danny Rand, the heroic and unyielding Iron Fist. Shaun's voice was cold. He held Danny Rand's arm and stretched it out of the huge floor-to-ceiling window. The strong wind was like a knife, and the arm holding the Iron Fist was as steady as a mountain, without any trembling. You think this is a comic book or a movie, where the righteous heroes always defeat the evil villains in the end. I want you to know the consequences of being my enemy. Shaun looked at Daredevil, who was struggling to get up and stop him, with a gentle and calm smile on his lips. He said softly, Attorney Matt Murdock, the reality is cruel. You have witnessed this with your own eyes. The true face of society, it is cold and ruthless. Isn't this why you chose to become Daredevil? Now, I will show you this bloody reality again. As he spoke, Shaun let go of his hand without warning. The young Iron Fist had a look of astonishment in his eyes. The wind roared in his ears, like a group of ghosts crying. After a brief feeling of weightlessness, there was a dull and heavy sound of bang. It was like a bag filled with water was hit on the ground, blood spurted out, the bones in the body shattered, and shocking pain rushed to the brain. After suffering for a moment, Danny Rand, the only guardian of Kunlun, died. No, Daredevil held his head and roared in pain. Next time, maybe it's Fergie Nelson, or maybe Karen Page. If you continue to insist on that ridiculous justice, you will feel the pain of losing everything before you die, I guarantee you that. Shaun walked up to Daredevil and looked down at him condescendingly. He reached out and roughly took off the Red Devil's mask and stepped on it under his feet. There will be no more heroes in Hell's Kitchen from now on. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.